It's time for Twig. This week in Google, a little bit of a different show. Jeff Jarvis is on assignment speaking at the Senate, testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. So we brought in Kathy Gellis, our internet lawyer. Paris Martineau is here. We're going to talk about the I.R.S. They're finally offering free filing, but it's in a limited rollout. We'll talk about big trials in AI, the information's breaking story, the one that Paris has been working on for the last couple of months. And, of course, plagiarism and AI. It's okay. You have a right to read. Kathy Gellis explains that and more next on This Week in Google.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twig. This Week in Google, episode 750, recorded Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. The Right to Read. This episode of This Week in Google is brought to you by Fastmail, the leader in email privacy for more than 20 years. Make email better. If you're still using free email, let me tell you why you want to check out Fastmail. Fastmail's moving email forward with new internet standards and open source innovations that power many other email services, but they start at Fastmail. Things like their quick settings, which let you choose new themes, switch between light and dark modes, change text size, generate masked email addresses, auto-save contacts, set default reminders, and more, all without leaving your mail. Add or buy a domain through Fastmail. That's great for any business or even a family that wants a personalized email address. They'll set up all the records for you. It works immediately. Look, you pay for free email with your privacy. At Fastmail, your data stays yours, and you get better productivity features, plus real tech support for as little as $3 a month. It's easy to download your old email's data, import it into your new Fastmail inbox. Fastmail has better spam filters and absolutely no ads. I've been a very happy Fastmail customer for more than a decade. I wouldn't go anywhere else. And oh, by the way, I love it. Fastmail also works with our password manager sponsor, Bitwarden or 1Password, to create unique email addresses for every site you log into. Don't forget to download the Fastmail app for iOS or Android. Get the most out of your email, or use Fastmail's incredible web-based email, or use Fastmail in your own existing email client. Fastmail, it's the better email service. Quality like this is worth $3 a month. Trust me. Try Fastmail now, free for 30 days. Fastmail.com/twit. That's fastmail.com/twit. It's time for Twig This Week in Google. Jeff Jarvis is in, Mr. Jarvis goes to Washington. He's in Washington, D.C., testifying before a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on AI and journalism. And we'll put in the show notes the links to the video of Jeff's appearance, although you can also go to his blog, buzzmachine.com, and read his opening statement. There were more senators in the room than in this picture. This is an empty room. But we've replaced Jeff temporarily with the wonderful Kathy Gellis, attorney at law, our expert on IP law. She is at CG Counsel, COUNSEL.com. You also read her stuff in Tech Dirt. And she's in studio, which is wonderful. Hi, Kathy.
Hello.
I can't remember. You've been here once before, right?
Once before.
Yeah. So it's nice to have you back. Most of the time, people come once and never return. No, I'm kidding. Also, Paris Martineau on the Zoom with us. Hello, Paris.
Yeah.
From the
Hi.
information. I see the big article came out.
It did.
How long have you been working on this?
A couple of months. I'd say like 2, probably
Wow.
on and off.
Blowing
It's very
the lid
funny.
off of it.
Yeah, a call came in during an ad break for last week's show about last minute things working on that article.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
very to the wire.
A Healthtech unicorn leaves a trail of clinic complaints and concerns over billing practices. Is this Theranos Act 2 or what?
I mean, it certainly bears some similarities. I think one of the original tips I'd gotten about this, I got on the phone with the source and they were like, oh, let me give you some background. This startup called Athelas started in kind of like the mid 2010s, was co-founded by a Stanford dropout, and the purpose was to create a machine that would use a single drop of blood for diagnostics. And I was like, oh, you don't say. I have heard of that. Surprisingly, that technology didn't end up taking off for a number of reasons. And it turns out they've had a lot of pivots along the way.
Did they predate Theranos with that proposal?
No, Theranos was actually a decade before that.
Interesting.
Almost. But it's very interesting when they kind of started to take off as a company. It was, 2016-ish, and this was just, I think the Wall Street Journal articles about Theranos first surfaced in 2015. And so, of course, the CEO and co-founder of this got a bunch of questions from the media being like, are you Theranos 2.0? And he was like, Theranos was a great idea, but, what we really just need is someone to do that, but legitimate. And it kind of, I think, is interesting given everything that happened next.
So they never did the blood drop test device.
I mean, they did do the blood drop test device. It just ended up not being as successful or scalable as they would hope.
That's interesting.
I think one of the pitfalls when you're a startup that's raised a lot of venture capital, and they've raised $150 million at a multi-billion-dollar valuation at this point, is you have this pressure to grow bigger and bigger. And in this startup's case, they ended up doing the blood testing device. It helped you kind of figure out the number of white blood cells in your blood. But it really ended up taking off only among a specific subset of patients who were being treated for schizophrenia with this one drug. So it wasn't
kind of
super
a limited
scalable.
Market. Yeah.
Yeah. So they ended up pivoting in like 2019 to this hot new market called like remote patient monitoring.
Telehealth.
Essentially where... Yeah, telehealth. Medicare and Medicaid had just put out new billing codes that allowed you to get reimbursed for this. So a lot of companies were diving in. It's essentially like, if your doctor sees you have hypertension, they'll send like a blood pressure cuff to your house, and you could test every other day to make sure your blood pressure's all right. And then the doctor gets reimbursed for you doing that and them reviewing the results. But as this program scaled up, a lot of employees started kind of raising the alarm internally, because a big part of the billing process for what I just described is in order to get reimbursed by agencies like Medicare or most insurers, the patient has to actually kind of use the device consistently. The actual rule is it's got to be 16 times a month, 16 different days in order for you to bill it monthly. And this startup had kind of an interesting interpretation of how that worked. They're like, well, the rule says we have to send 16 days of health data. Technically, the blood pressure cuff, it's internet connected. So every day it's sending its battery life.
Even nobody's
and
using
cell
it.
phone connectivity, even if no one's using it or just using it once. So a bunch of people had been kind of like, hey, I'm not sure if that's entirely within the spirit of the law. And it turns out a lot of attorneys that I spoke to agree with this.
Wow. Do you think it was intentionally shady, or they just maybe didn't read the rules closely enough?
I mean, I cannot comment on their intentions or not, because obviously I am not the person. But I think it is interesting that I think that there are like certain patterns of behavior you could see where if something's unintentional when it comes to acts that could rise to like Medicare fraud, ideally, if someone raises the alarm about this, the company's or doctor's response would be, oh my gosh, let's fix this.
Yeah.
And it does seem curious that there were a number of times over the past couple of years that, sources say current employees or former employees raised concerns about this. Right. And every time they were like, nah, it's fine.
Their timing was good. They launched this a year before the pandemic. Then all of a sudden telehealth is like the hot thing, right?
Yeah. And it became even more lucrative and easy to bill for. They had all these kind of concerns come up. And so eventually they were like, let's pivot to a different business. And essentially the business they pivoted to in Act 3 is... I won't bore you with the details, but it's kind of like the back end for doctors and clinics as far as finances go. Like, we'll help you submit insurance claims and whatnot. And they pitched all these different doctors saying like, hey, we'll supercharge your business. We've got all this high tech stuff. or AI powered, it'll be fantastic. But once these doctors switched over their whole billing operations to this startup, a lot of them experienced serious drops in revenue. One who went on the record in this story said the first, I think, two or so months they worked with this company, they got $0 back from insurers, and they had to take a 6-figure payday loan in order to make payroll.
Oish. The story is on the information you subscribe, of course. The healthcare unicorn leaves a trail of clinic complaints, concerns over billing practices. This is I really honor the information for doing this kind of deep journalism and giving you the time to do it right, which is great, Paris Martineau. We like your work. We're thrilled. Alex Kantrowitz has said this several times. He's the creator of the Big Tech podcast and newsletter. And he says the problem really is the financialization of the tech sector, that there's so much money going around with VCs and stuff that it encourages people to kind of scramble to find, something to raise money on. And when you start getting billion-dollar valuations, there's a lot of pressure to deliver.
It's sort of like an awful lot of rent-seeking. How can we extract money out of it versus how can we build sustainable
real innovation
businesses? Well, sustainability. And so there is some question about people are like, well, this is the end result of capitalism. I think it's just sort of, we may have some rules that guide capitalism, our version of it, that create incentives that don't lead us to actually get things that we want. We may have rules that encourage, essentially looting, taking out whatever you can as quickly as you can. A lot of our laws are built to protect shareholders, protect the financiers, because we want them to be able to comfortably contribute capital and feel like they can get it out. But we may be favoring those interests at the expense of, but long-term, are the businesses sustainable? And maybe they could have been sustainable businesses, but the businesses are in a position where they're having to make choices that skew the interests and may compromise long-term sustainability versus short-term protecting certain interests so they can get their money out.
So you mean Adam Smith was wrong and that the free hand of the market just isn't sufficient to make it all work perfectly?
He might be right, but we don't have a free hand of the market doing. We've already got an awful lot of...
It's all messed up already.
There's a lot of fudging happening, and we're just not cognizant of well-tuning the fudging, so you get these collateral effects.
By the way, as long as I'm mentioning the information, I'll mention it's the 10th anniversary. Congratulations to Jessica and all of you. And they're asking people to send them videos talking about how the information has helped them in their businesses or their lives. So you can, if you're an information subscriber.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah, should I record one? So thanks to you, Jessica and Sam. I know Paris Martineau. Paris has a job. All right, let's talk about, since we have an attorney in-house, let's talk about the topic we've been talking a lot about. There's more news around it. This is the issue of AI and copyright. I bet you have some thoughts about this, Kathy Gillis. And, of course, the thing that got a lot of attention is the New York Times suing OpenAI and Microsoft for, is it plagiarism? For stealing its content and using it in this training. And there's been some interesting things. There was a great piece on TechDirt, actually, about exactly this topic, and it was a little controversial. Brian Fry wrote, "Plagiarism is fine."
Well, Brian, yes, he wrote that. I think he's also writing it more in response to
the firing of Claudine Gay, I'm sure.
There's a lot of hysteria about plagiarism. There's sort of a conceptual overlap between what is plagiarism and what is copyright infringement, but neither concept is well thought out, and they aren't the same things, and they don't necessarily redeem the same values. There's an awful lot that might qualify as plagiarism that isn't actually copyright infringement. And then there's the question of, well, even if it does count as plagiarism, is this something where it's actually healthy for us to denigrate it? Is this something that's actually wrong? And if it is wrong, why do we think it's wrong, and there's our reaction something that vindicates the thing that we care about? Like, we might care about, the credit about somebody.
Yeah, I think it's an emotional thing where like, well, it's just wrong to take somebody's writing and palm it off as your own.
And if to the extent that that's happening, maybe that is something that does need to be recognized.
It feels wrong.
It feels wrong, and maybe the norms should be built around no to that.
Right.
But one of the
Fry
points,
writes, plagiarism is fine. Plagiarism rules are stupid, and the plagiarism police should mind their own business.
because I think he's got a fair point, and I had made one sort of like 15 years ago or so when I was in law school, because there was a plagiarism controversy where I was looking at what were people doing and having a reaction of, why is this wrong? That's why you have to tease out what you actually care about. So if we do care about this idea of like passing off somebody's work as your own, that feels kind of fraudulent and deceptive. And so we don't like that. But that's a certain value of what we would care about. But a lot of what the hysteria is over isn't doing that. It isn't pressing that sort of emotional button. It's just reusing words. And you have to reuse words or reuse ideas, because that's actually how we move in knowledge forward.
This is why I tie it into the AI debate. He said, Fry writes, no one owns ideas, and no one should own the words we use to express them either. I mean, that's the intellectual process, right? And we all kind of feel in our gut, well, it's wrong to say I thought this up on my own. But on the other hand, when you're writing a paper, when you're writing anything, you're basing it on stuff you have absorbed and read and learned. And everything we do here is like that, is regenerating. I try to give credit, I gave Brian credit and so forth. But also I may say ideas that turn out to be identical to something somebody said that I read some time ago. And the reason I bring it up is not so much to talk about plagiarism, but that human process is also kind of what AI is doing when it's training, isn't it, Paris? It's kind of... I can't remember where you came down on this New York Times controversy last week.
I mean, I think I'm middling on it. I think
you're a content creator, and you have, your stuff is published in the information.
Yeah, I think that certainly there is a case to be made that for-profit entities probably shouldn't be benefiting from scraping content creators' work in order to build their large language models and train them. But I think that's a bit more nuanced and different than what the New York Times OpenAI controversy is about. I think, this point I think we talked to death on the other week's episode, that obviously the claims around OpenAI being able to piece together a Guy Fieri restaurant review based on third-party articles is a little bit silly. I'm curious, what did you think of OpenAI's response, Leo?
Yeah, I was just going to pull that up. Let's see. I probably shouldn't pull up the New York Times article about that. Let me.
So, how
about the Hollywood Reporter, TechCrunch, VentureBeat, The Verge? Who should I plagiarize for this segment? How about OpenAI? Let's plagiarize themselves.
Let's plagiarize OpenAI.
Yeah,
well, don't take the New York Times. Don't amplify. The New York Times is so hypocritical. They don't want to be read. Jeff's comments at his testimony today, I think, are in alignment of the comments that I've been.
What did he say? I didn't hear it.
You can't lock this stuff up. This is part of language. And so the comments that I've filed on behalf of the Copia Institute at the Copyright Office are making the point that you cannot have copyright obstruct the training of AI. We can have conversations about what should happen to the output, but using copyright as a basis to obstruct training of AI is offending the right to read. Because one of the points that Jeff also made in his testimony is that if the humans can read it, why can't you send your tools to do the reading for you, to help you? And why shouldn't those tools be software-based?
And I would further make the argument that is a huge benefit, societal benefit, to have these tools. So by restricting that capability, we're actually harming society. Yeah, maybe we're protecting the New York Times, or let's put it in something maybe we care more about, Paris Martineau. But there is still also a societal benefit to that, right?
It's also worse. If you say you have to actually distort copyright law to say no to it.
Oh.
And if you say no to it in this context, you are saying no to it in a whole bunch of other contexts that will really hurt us. If
that was Mike Masnick's contention in his article on TechDirt, was the New York Times is opening a can of worms here because they're doing it too.
Oh, yeah. Well, and he and I have been advocating, so I've submitted comments at the Copyright Office on behalf of Mike, making the point of right to read is something that we actually have to value, and the right to read conflicts with the idea that copyright could obstruct the ability to read, because the training of AI is essentially reading the material that exists. And if you're going to say, no, you can't read the material that exists, that's not something that copyright law actually does. That's not a power that the copyright owner has to say no to reading. They can say no to making copies, but they can't say no to the reading. So that
was one response that OpenAI said in New York Times is, that's a bug, that it's regurgitating the contents of an article. And it's true, the New York Times had to jump through hoops to get it to do that in the first place. And that's not the intent of
it's not the
OpenAI.
intent. And somebody's also pointed out that if you're going to have liability for the output of AI spitting out something that is too close of a copy, that the liability has to do with who's induced that output. And that is a separate issue from the learning and the reading, because the
that's
training
really interesting.
So one of the points that we made in our comments is you really can't conflate these issues. Like, AI is, look, people are doing dumb things with it, and there's a whole bunch of reasons to pull the reins on some of the dumb things that are happening. But you can't use the moral panic for what the dumb things are and just look for anything you can throw to put, throw a wrench in the works and, copyright. Well, we can stop this if we throw copyright into the works. You will break things. You will break things that are important and that need to exist if you throw copyright in to obstruct. And you have to break down what it is that's going on. There's different things that are, when you think about AI, there's different things. There's how we use it. There's how we train it. There's outputs. There's inputs. And if you treat them all as kind of one whole ball of wax that we're going to regard in one fell analytical swoop, you're not going to be able to deal with it well. You need to deal with the different parts in a much more nuanced fashion.
So maybe instead of just talking about the New York Times suit, let's talk about there are many lawsuits going on. John Grisham has sued OpenAI along with a bunch of other authors. Getty Images sued Stability AI, creators of Stable Diffusion, saying they copied 12 million Getty images. In fact, you could see the Greeked Getty watermark on some of these generated images. Stability, Midjourney, and DeviantArt hit with a class action lawsuit. GitHub, Microsoft, OpenAI proposed class action lawsuit filed last year, which says they scraped licensed code to train their licensed code to create their code generators. I mean, the courts are going to be ruling on this for years to come. But so far, the handful of rulings we've seen have all been in favor of the AI, haven't they?
They have, although some of it is more procedural than anything else. A lot of these complaints
they're not precedents. They're just...
Well, they're not far enough along to be precedents, but they're not really necessarily reaching the merits. These cases have procedural problems with them. Like, for a number of cases, the claims were built on copyright claims where the copyrights hadn't been registered or hadn't been registered in time, and so you can't sustain the lawsuit if you don't dot the I's carefully. So a lot of these cases have gone away or gone back to start more on procedural things. There's some rumblings that the courts aren't really going to buy it, and it's kind of nice that they didn't ignore the procedural things because they were so keen to buy the arguments on the merits. But we haven't really...
So it's undecided still.
It's undecided. We haven't really had a fully formed quality lawsuit really push the envelope where the courts have reached the merits. But meanwhile, the Copyright Office is doing a study, and they might produce a result of their study before the courts get to it.
Oh.
In which case that would have some influence.
Would that trump the courts?
It wouldn't trump it, but it would be influential,
It would
I
influence
think.
the courts, yeah.
Interesting.
Paris?
I'm curious, are there any cases where you think like these sort of plaintiffs might have a legitimate case against any of these AI companies? Or I think your argument about the right to read is very compelling. Does it change when the content being consumed and generated by these large models is different? Like, does an image-based generation, I could kind of see the argument of a company like Deviant or Getty, if it's like you are scraping all of our images and then generating something similar to that. But legally, does that have any standing?
Well, Getty gets upset if you even think about one of their images. So they're
litigious, are they?
They may be a tad. So, I mean, whether somebody would be able to press a lawsuit where they would be able to get enough leverage to succeed on the lawsuit, that is probably more likely than whether they should. Whether if we really stopped and took a look at this on the merits and really carefully decided what made sense. No, I think the right to read thing would cover whether it was reading words or looking at images. I mean, some language is image based, and character-based languages are not Latin alphabet languages, and it still counts. Where it's kind of, I haven't found good language I want to use in all my comments, but I think we use, because I hate this, I use consume content, and there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to phrase it that way. But I really did want to come up with something. The right to read is a phrase that exists. It's part of First Amendment doctrine.
It's not merely the right to speak; it's also the right to read.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't have a ton of cases on it, but it's doctrine. I didn't make that term up.
Well, bear with me for a moment, because I want to take you back to 1908. I think you know where I'm going, Kathy. So, at the turn of the century, in the 1890s, a new technology came along called the player piano, where they could make rolls of popular songs, John Philip Sousa's songs. You'd plug it into your piano, you'd pump the pedals. I remember I had one of these, or I played with one of these when I was a kid, and it would play the song on the piano.
1908?
Yeah.
Also?
And the keys would move and everything. Well, the composers were pissed off. They were worried that would kill the demand for sheet music, which was a prime way that they made money. So the player piano company said, we're not going to pay royalties for putting these songs on paper rolls. It went to the Supreme Court, White Smith Music Publishing Company versus Apollo Company, in 1908. The Supreme Court ruled that because humans couldn't read player piano rolls, they weren't in fact copies. So the composers were not due any royalties. They ruled in favor of the machine, in effect.
Interesting,
wow.
But you said 1908, and that is 2 copyright statutes ago.
Oh, well.
So sometimes
It's so similar to this issue, though, isn't it, right?
It's interesting.
It is very.
And sometimes things that happened, in earlier statutes can linger, like our
Well, as
our
a result, by the way,
understanding
there was a new Copyright Act the next year
Yeah.
that extended the law to cover mechanical reproductions.
And that is one thing.
So that's one way to address that, by the way, is for Congress to say, oh, yeah, there is a loophole, but we're going to extend the copyright to cover it.
Right, but that isn't good if they have to distort the balance of the copyright statute in order to plug that hole. And it's really bad if the way they've distorted the copyright statute puts it out of compliance with the First Amendment, because the First Amendment is the thing that's saying, like, hi, there's a right to read. Also, there is language in the Constitution that authorizes Congress to do copyright law, says we do copyright law and also patents in the pursuit of the progress of science and the useful arts. The whole point is to have law that is going to make sure that there is progress of knowledge and that the country has something to sink its teeth into intellectually.
In a way, that's what happened in 1909, because they created what's called a compulsory license, which is that the copyright holder was compelled to license for a relatively low fee. So, and we wouldn't have, for instance, cover songs if this compulsory license didn't
I have mixed
exist.
feelings about about compulsory licenses.
I have mixed feelings about cover songs, so we can meet in the
So we've
middle.
got it covered.
Well, irrespective of that, compulsory licenses are conceptually a nice idea because they take away the transaction costs.
It's like 2 cents or something.
They cause it to. So compulsory licenses.
Wait, what exactly is a compulsory license?
Compulsory
first?
license. Well, first of all, one of the reasons they're not a panacea here is because they would still presume that the copyright holder would have a right to say no. What the compulsory license does
So it's not really
is,
compulsory.
No, it is compulsory.
Oh.
So it's addressing a situation where the copyright owner would have the power via their copyright to say no to somebody who wanted to use the thing that they owned. And what a compulsory license does that is helpful is it means that they can't say no, and it pre-negotiates the terms by which they have to say yes. So
it's kind of like FRAND when we talk about licensing.
It
much
may be,
more recently.
I'm not as familiar with that one, but types of things like that where the copyright holder could say no, but it's going to cause a whole bunch of economic problems if they say no. So a compulsory license will, in theory, streamline things because it turns it into a yes and pre-negotiates what the terms of the yes are. And in theory, that helps make it that uses can still happen and the copyright owners get paid and everybody's happy. The problem is twofold. First of all, if you've changed, a compulsory license shouldn't be a solution where the copyright owner did not have the right to say no in the first place. So when we're thinking about this AI stuff, if the copyright owners can't say no to software reading their stuff, then a compulsory license is not going to solve the problem because it has just given them the power to say no. And that is a problem because if they can say no here, they can say no to all sorts of reading that happens.
So one of OpenAI's contentions is if you say AIs cannot ingest copyright material, you're not going to get very good AIs because this podcast is by default copyrighted simply by the fact that it exists. I assert, in fact, a Creative Commons license, but everything you do is copyrighted out of the gate.
Pretty much. And
But does AI have a right to have good material?
But people do. People do. And I mean, functionally, to Leo's point, there's huge problems with bias in AI. And one of the reasons that you have problems with bias in AI is because they don't get to train on a wide enough sample. So, to you, Paris, of like, do you feel good, bad, or otherwise about having your stuff read? More power to you that you get to contribute to the language that is understood by our developing artificial intelligence. Whereas if your words aren't there, you're not there. You are helping enrich the vocabulary as we can try to endow our technology to understand it. But
and again, I argue that you could go back and forth on the merits of this, but AI is potentially a life-changing innovation in technology comparable to the personal computer and the internet, maybe even more so. And we shouldn't be putting curbs on it at this point.
You shouldn't be. I mean, where maybe some curbs are appropriate, but that's where the new us comes in. Maybe we need the curbs in terms of how we're applying it, given that it's not a fully cooked technology yet and everybody's treating it like magic.
I mean, I'm not against any regulation,
right,
but I think saying you can't read anything that's copyright is really going to be detrimental.
For the purposes of training, then no, I do not think
no curbs at all. Yeah.
I think no curbs, and certainly not copyright curbs.
The more the better.
And if you put the copyright curbs on, you're changing copyright, and you're changing copyright that's going to have collateral effects in other ways. It's going to affect everyone's right to read as human beings, and it's also going to affect other ways that we use software tools like search engines.
So let's dig into this. So it's not merely bad for AI. Mm-hmm. It would be changing how copyright works to assert that AI cannot read these copyrighted works.
I think it does. I think it distorts it, and I think it gives a copyright owner an exclusive power to exclude that the statute does not give.
It abrogates the right to read.
And it interferes with that. And that's not the way that copyright law is structured. And it would have a constitutional problem with being structured that way, given that we have the First Amendment, which limits what Congress can do in any domain, even ones where they're allowed to legislate. And it would also break other applications where we currently, never mind the humans who want to be able to go read all their books, including read digital books, but it would also affect other software that does reading, like search engines. They're crawling the web and they're reading.
Well, that's a good point, aren't they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you start changing the law to say, well, screw AI, it's terrible, let's just stop it, even if you were right that it should be stopped, if you use copyright to do it, you're going to stop a whole lot of other things that we don't actually think are bad.
You might break search engines.
You break search engines.
You're basically then
they're
the New York
already
Times
pretty broken.
And the New York Times, by the way, would love to say, well, this is a problem because they sort of would love to say Google can't look at them, but on the other hand, they kind of want Google to index them.
Well, Mike Masnick has also pointed out that the New York Times would not like the collateral effects of
Yes, this would be
copyright law
damaging.
changing in order if its complaint could be sustained. They already had issues with like the freelancers being able to assert copyright and stuff, and it's not going to be good for the New York Times bottom line if copyright law changes in this way. Yeah.
So what's the prognosis? What's going to happen at this point?
Other things in the world are going to break before we have copyright break AI.
Like, okay.
I think that's a good prediction.
Okay.
But it does bring up a second thing that is jumping ahead to elsewhere in our rundown. The appeal of the Internet Archive.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought because I do want to talk very much about that. We're lucky to have Kathy Gellis here. She is. This is her area of expertise. She's admitted to the Supreme Court, so she can prosecute cases there. She's also filed amicus briefs in a lot of very well-known cases, including a recent copyright case with the estate of Andy Warhol, which didn't work out to your...
No, I'm not happy with the result of that particular case.
We can talk about that, too. Paris Martineau, also here from the Information Superstar Reporter, the Lois Lane of This Week in Google. How about that? And I must be, if you're the Lois Lane, I must be the Perry White, right? Great Caesar's
Yeah,
Ghost.
definitely.
Yeah.
Can I be Superman?
Oh, yeah.
You can be Superman.
Okay.
Yeah, you can be Superman,
Okay.
Kathy.
And that means, Benito, you're Jimmy Olsen. All right, we're going to take a little break. We'll come back with more in just a little bit. As I mentioned, in case you missed it, Jeff Jarvis out of pocket because he's, I don't know, he's just testifying before the United States Senate. That's all. No big deal.
He's wearing a very snazzy suit. You
he looks
should
good.
watch the video.
And
Just a typical
great.
Wednesday
as somebody
playing hooky.
pointed out, the color, somehow the Senate got the color balance right. We've never been able to do it in Jeff's house. Can you just show a little
It
bit?
seems like Jeff has every yellow light in America in his whatever room he's filming in.
I know. Show, actually, there's a little clip of him answering a question, I think, in the rundown. Let me look. That looked like it might be interesting. Did you see?
He does give a casual shout out to the pod. which
He
I think
mentions
is
the
huge for
pod?
us.
Is it
He
our
says
pod? He does
on
other
the-
pods.
He gives a quote from our episode with the Notebook LM guy.
Oh, yeah? Good.
He says, on the podcast I co-host, listen, we haven't gotten Twig in the congressional record yet.
Not
but we're
yet.
one step closer.
We have. Josh Howley said when he introduced Jeff, he said he was a host on these two podcasts, This Week in Google and AI Insight.
Hey, that counts.
Hey. Josh Hawley, hey? Wow.
Josh Hawley.
Oh, my gosh.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Did he go like this when he mentioned Twig? I don't know.
Did he flee the Senate?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have, you know what I'm talking about? There's a clip. Where did I see the rundown of these clips? I think where Jeff answers a specific question. I don't know. Did you give me the clips? It's posted. Oh, it's on X? I can't hear you. What?
I think he put it on a Post-it.
Oh, it's that Post-it. What did I do with the Post-it?
That's the original form of posting.
Wait,
Leo's just frantically searching every pocket on his person.
where did I put that Post-it? Oh, here it is. It's on the floor. You know what? It sticks nicely to the carpet, though.
That's what 3M had in mind.
Wait a minute. I got it. Mm-hmm. John's going to climb down. And
Wow,
this
a
is
hero.
High tech. Thank you. Jeff, answer example. It's in 141:57. Well, it's just the shortest clip we have. That's
You realize that if copyright obstructs AI, this is how all information will be shared from here on out.
which is how?
Manually.
On Post-it notes?
Yes.
On a post-it
This
note,
is the
yeah.
future of AI.
All right, I have it queued up here.
All right. Here's Jeff testifying. Dick Blumenthal's asking him a question. Senator Blumenthal.
Under Section 230.
Can you skip back a little bit just so we get the full?
Oh my gosh.
Given that content to trends, or it is not covered, nonetheless, we have introduced no Section 230 immunity for AI Act, just to make it explicit and clear.
Yeah, so the woman before
And
him
there
asked
is
the
a
question.
really
So
kind of deeply offensive irony here, which is that all of you and your publications or your broadcast station can be sued. You can be sued for, in effect, falsity, and if it's with respect to a public figure like myself, maybe the standard's a little bit higher, but I have a right to go to court. Not so when it comes to social media. So that the organization that
This is his argument
use
for
your
undermining
content to
230.
train
I don't even want to hear it.
or change
By the way, Blumenthal,
They would
Klobuchar,
attributions because they
Tom
would want to
Tillis.
attach.
They've got the and this hearing is all about a number of weird, like the No Fakes Act. Do you know about the No Fakes Act?
I've lost track of that.
It's a really good acronym.
It's an acronym.
I mean, yeah, really
It's
good.
it's
is,
a it's a
sarcastic.
retro. Well, you're
Retronym.
saying that in sarcastically, of course. Now, I know that you
Yes.
think it's a really good. It's a retronym that stands for. Let me see if I
This
can
is just a
find it.
laundry basket for every single tech policy bugaboo that
And in
these
every
senators
respect,
have.
I mean, that's how
terrible
all of
ideas.
these are.
But I haven't seen one that has been this much of a collective basket of it. but
I mean,
well,
This is-
I don't mean
I
to
haven't
pay
watched one
compliments
of
to
these.
you.
I haven't watched one of these in a while, but I remember back in like the 2016 to 2019 era, I had to watch all of these
All right, maybe
and
I've
report
blocked
on
it out.
all of them, and they all sucked. They all were just, every time I'd go in and be like, wow, we're talking
Kappa,
about social media and
COSA.
disinformation.
Yeah, that goes on
It'll
and
be
on.
great and informative, and it's just every single congressperson standing on their soapbox, giving their weird canned lines, not listening to anything around them, and nothing comes of it. I don't know if this
is
is
it
what happened with this one,
performative?
but
Do you think?
100%. It's
Yeah.
wrestling.
Yeah, because they're trying to get votes.
Yeah.
It's not about. It's not about
This is just an
policy.
This is an extra Voltron of stupid. I don't know. Maybe I don't. It's not that I want to pay compliments to any hearing that has ever come before for all the reasons that Paris just discussed. But this one, like even the whole thing of like Jeff was there to talk about AI, but also news and the JCPA and like link taxes. So we've got copyright in 230 and
It's
AI
way too,
and
it's so
like
much.
Yeah, no, this
There's
is
so many fronts.
Yeah.
This is Chris Coons, Marsha Blackburn, Amy Klobuchar, and Tom Tillis's bill. By the way, just looking at the sponsors tells you this is going to be a mishmash, a nut jobbery.
That's too complimentary. But yes.
Nurture, this is what No Fake stands for. Nurture originals, foster art, and keep entertainment safe. And really, it is to protect, I guess, creators against artificial intelligence. In one high-profile example, they write, the song Heart on My Sleeve, which was created with the AI-generated replicas of the voices of pop stars Drake and The Weeknd, quickly accumulated hundreds of thousands of listens on YouTube, Spotify, and other streaming sites before it was identified as a fake and removed from the platforms.
How are Drake and The Weeknd ever going to finance their lifestyles now?
I don't think they can survive.
They've been devastated by this.
Even worse, an AI-generated version of Tom Hanks was used to endorse a dental plan. Now, admittedly, I don't think they're trying to protect Tom Hanks there, but the poor schmucks who thought, well, Tom Hanks endorses it, it must be good, and bought the dental plan.
You don't need to change law. That sounds like
It's
outright.
already illegal.
This sounds pretty fraudulent. Like, I think we have enough legal tools
Yeah.
to solve these problems.
And the risk is by doing, well, you kind of said it in a nutshell. You know, if they succeed, if New York Times succeeds in this case against OpenAI, they're actually undermining copyright and undermining the right to read, which is it's more than copyright.
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
would
a
say
First Amendment right.
distorting the balance of copyright in a way that collapses it even more than it's being internally collapsed already.
Yeah.
But with collateral effects that I think are incompatible with the First Amendment and also the whole constitutional mandate that empowers Congress to pass copyright law at all. It's not going to help promote the progress of science and useful arts.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big question here, though, about
Benito, yes.
I don't want OpenAI and Google to make $1 billion off of what I've written. Like that's like the big argument, really.
I agree.
Comes at the end. Like
I think
it's these
bad.
giant $1 billion corporations that are actually going to make the money at the end of the day out of all this stuff.
I'm not sure that's necessarily true. And one of the things is the more the law forbids the innovation, the more likely that will be the end product. This is true for most tech policy regulation. The big companies have the resources to be able to navigate, I don't want to say everything you throw at them, but an awful lot.
This is the regulatory capture we're always talking about.
Yeah, and this is why I think, some of the big companies don't push back nearly as hard as they should against some of these really terrible bills.
Sometimes they lobby for them. Meta's always lobbying, oh, please regulate us, please.
I mean, I don't think Meta measures its own self-interest very well either. Like they blessed FOSTA and now are fielding FOSTA lawsuits.
Right,
So
right.
I don't think it was very smart for their own interest. But yes, that sort of thing of like, well, we got ours, so we're fine. And hey, if it takes down our competition, all the better for us. That doesn't help, and it just makes people hate them more, which means that people throw more terrible legislation at the tech sector. But the things that affect small innovation, these changes distort the ability of the not Googles to do the innovation.
I would also say, Benito, don't you have the confidence that you could still write a song better than the AI could?
It's not about what I have to do in the future. It's about the work I have done in the past that I will not get paid for that work that I have done.
Do you think that they will take away your ability to earn from that previous work?
No, I think about it as like remixing music, right? Like people who use samples and things like that in their music, they pay. Now it's been established that now they have to pay for these samples, right?
Yeah, that's compulsory licensing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I'm not saying that that's the answer, and I don't have an answer. I'm just saying like this is the thing that feels icky.
Well, that's the thing. It's an emotional gut reaction from all creators. Don't steal my stuff, man. And I really understand that. Especially, you make the excellent point, Benito. If it's a big tech company making money off of it, that's even ickier, right?
Well, one of the things that came up in the Copyright Office comments is Mark Andreessen contributed a really dumb comment where he was really, really arrogant about
Classic.
I got mine, I'm fine, and everybody just hates him. And people don't, well, there's the cult of Sam Altman, but for everybody else, like, they don't like him. He's not, it's kind of tech bro stuff, and nobody wants these guys to win. They just may happen to be right along the way. And if you distort law to try to take them down, you're going to have collateral effects on the non-tech bros and prevent anybody else from doing the innovation and creativity. So I ended up putting in the second reply comment some point of like, there's whatever the externalities you don't like about what, I didn't point to him specifically, but if you really don't like what Andreessen is cooking, this isn't about him. This is about something more principled, and you can deal with him later, including one of the presumptions is, well, they don't like this sense of unjust enrichment of like he can input everything for free and then make money on the output. But I don't think it necessarily follows that he should necessarily be able to make money on all the output anyway, because again, there's a question of how much of that output really should be entitled to copyright protection at all. I think that's a separate question. It's not one I've fully dived into, but that is a question and is a separate one. And it doesn't mean that just because he can produce his tool to produce more stuff that he will get rich from it.
Well, this is why I'm an advocate of open source, by the way, AI. I think that might make you feel better if at least somebody's not making money off of what you're doing. We license from the very beginning when we started the podcast. I understood this kind of issue. Larry Lessig, who was a guest on the podcast in the early days, had created the Creative Commons license to respond to this, because he said there's really only two choices right now for creators. You either copyright it or you put it in the public domain, and neither one is necessarily suits. He created Creative Commons, and that's our license to this day, which we license in Creative Commons no commercial, which is you can remix our stuff. You have to give us attribution, and you can't use it for commercial purposes. So you can't make money off of it. You can't take the podcast and sell it on your television station, for instance. But we want people to remix it and reuse it and use clips and so forth. I mean, maybe there's something in the AI age that, we got to take a break. But
I do think that there should be one last thought. Sorry,
please,
I know
I know.
I do
it's
think
impossible.
there should be some sort of middle ground in between.
Yeah.
It should be a Wild West. There should be no regulation or restrictions whatsoever on AI, and we should restrict it so heavily it messes up copyright law for all of us. I think that there's got to be somewhere
Maybe.
in between that.
And that's why I like Creative Commons, for instance. That was kind of that middle ground, which was it allowed remixing, but it also protected some rights. Anyway, we'll come back. We've got lots more, but I have to take a break. Our show today brought to you by Rocket Money. Man, I want to take this break because this company has saved enough money for me now to buy a Vision Pro. So that is very good. If I ask you how many subscriptions, recurring payments you have, could you list them? And could you add up all the money that goes out of your pocket that way? I'll tell you what, if you'd asked me before I started using Rocket Money, I would have thought I knew the answer, but I would have been so wrong. Rocket Money finds subscriptions. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions. It also monitors your spending, helps lower your bills. It's really got a lot of benefits. But let me just talk about the subscriptions thing. I had accidentally, it's a dark pattern on a lot of political contribution websites where you want to make a contribution and there's a hidden checkbox that says, you want to do this monthly, right? And I didn't see that checkbox. And I missed the fact that for months I was getting dinged every month for an additional contribution. The election was over and they were still taking money. Rocket Money found it, turned it off for me, and that's happened over and over again. It really works. Rocket Money has more than 5 million users. They've helped save its members an average of $720 a year, more than $500 million in canceled subscriptions. With Rocket Money, you can see all your subscriptions in one place. If you see something you don't want, you go, I'm still subscribed to that. You can cancel with a tap. I just got dinged a couple of days ago for something. I didn't know about it. Rocket Money said, hey, that was a recurring payment. I said, I don't even know who this is. Instead of disputing it with a credit card or calling the company, I just had Rocket Money cancel it. You never have to get on the phone with customer service. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and keep track of your spending and lower your bills too by going to rocketmoney.com/twig. This thing's great. rocketmoney.com/twig. rocketmoney.com/twig. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Google. Do I want to launch back into the copyright, or have we? The thing is, this is never going to really resolve. But I think we've hit the highlights. We've hit the important.
Like I talk about the Internet Archive lawsuit.
Internet Archive.
Ooh,
This is a big one for me. Brewster Kahle got a little money out of the sale of his company. I think it was Waze to AOL, and instead of buying a yacht, he decided to create something called the Internet Archive, archive.org. Because he felt like there is a lot of history of our culture online that is just going to go away in a year or two because the website's going to go down. I'm going to record everything. And he's done it. And I remember I've interviewed him. I said, what about copyright? He said, we'll worry about that when somebody sues us. But we feel like any library, it's more important that we make copies of all this stuff. And if you've ever used the Wayback Machine, it's
incredible.
I signed up for this is one monthly contribution I don't mind making because I really want to support what Brewster and company are doing. So who sued him?
Well, there's a number of things that the Internet Archive archives, and they have a number of faculties about what they make available. But this is all about the faculty that scanned books and then lent books out, primarily using a process called controlled digital lending. They
especially during pandemic, they had an emergency.
Well, that library. There was a small bit of time at the beginning of the lockdown aspects of the pandemic where controlled digital lending basically means that if we physically had the copy of the book, instead of physically handing it to a person, we just let one digital copy
That's
out.
What libraries
but
do
it's
with a physical
right.
copies.
Well, so a library that owns a copy of a book is allowed to lend it.
Right.
And what they said is, okay, well, people can't physically get access to the books, so controlled digital lending is the idea that, well, they had a digital copy of the book, which was a digital copy they made themselves. And instead of physically handing a reader the book, they let the reader take a digital copy, but only enough only as many digital copies could be checked out as physical copies of the books existed, because it would be just the same as
a library.
Either the library, that book would be out the door, and it's only going to one reader. And
libraries do this with there's apps like Libby, where libraries have controlled digital lending of digital archives.
I'm not as familiar with other libraries.
They do audiobooks that way as well. These are what...
Yeah, it's like an e-library.
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple concept.
Some of them may vary because some of them may be e-libraries based on digital copies of the books that may have been acquired via the publishers. One of the things the publisher doesn't like is that the Internet Archive made its own digital copies. So these aren't about ones that
they weren't purchased.
They weren't purchased as e-copies. They were purchased as physical copies,
which were then
that the
scanned.
And then scanned.
So this is one of the things that is upsetting the publishers, which I don't think is something that should be meaningful, but it's something that upsets them.
As Cory Doctorow has pointed out many, many times, the publishers like to put libraries out of their misery as well. I mean, the publishers don't like this in any form.
The publishers are easy to upset generally.
Yeah. I mean, there's arguments that if we were inventing libraries today, they would never be allowed to exist. But one of the things that then happened at the beginning of the lockdown is the National Emergency Library, where the Internet Archive took off the one-for-one limitations because people, were entitled to have access to books if they could have gotten to the buildings with the books, but they couldn't get to the buildings with the books. So the fair use argument about not having the one-for-one lending was built around the exigency of, people aren't really getting, they need it. Like, the whole point of fair use is to make sure that people, can actually interact with the knowledge that copyright is incentivizing the creation of, but functionally nobody can get access to it. So the fair use argument during that period was built around that exigency of this has to happen, or else there's no point of having copyright producing books because nobody can physically get the books. So
and this was a limited time thing.
It was a limited time thing, but it seems to have been the pointiest stick that woke up the bear.
Really pissed him off.
And so then the bear sued, but the bear didn't just sue over that time period, but then it sued over the controlled digital lending altogether. And
where does that stand? Because we've talked about this before. It feels like we've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah. So the case was unfortunately lost at the district court. So what's happening now is it's up at the Second Circuit for appeal.
What were the grounds of the loss? That was earlier this last year, right?
I'm blanking on some of the specifics, but basically it was the fair use analysis was very curt and tangled in on itself in arguably not a correct way. The Internet Archive has filed its opening brief pointing out ways that the fair use analysis was not the way that the fair use analysis is supposed to go. I filed an amicus brief for the Copia Institute, going back to some of what I was talking about in the AI.
Is the Copia Institute the Internet Archive?
No, the Copia Institute is TechDirt.
TechDirt.
Yes, that's the think tanky arm of TechDirt.
Right.
The brief that we filed made some of the same arguments I was making earlier about the copyright in AI, where what does Congress get to do in the copyright space? It gets to pass copyright law to the extent that it promotes the progress of science and the useful arts, and is constrained by the First Amendment, including its right to read. So we're not taking issue with the way that the copyright statute is written, but we're taking issue with the way the district court interpreted the copyright statute, because for them to look at it and say that the fair use decision should have not been in favor of the Internet Archive makes the copyright statute constitutionally problematic, because now you're obstructing the progress of, you're obstructing knowledge. You're standing in the way of readers and the things that they want to read and would have been entitled to read.
Well, but I'm sure the book publishers would say if it comes down to knowledge versus our profits, we are going to...
Profits win every time.
Yeah, profits should win every single time.
They are very cogently making that argument. I just don't think that's the one that...
we as a society would like.
As a society, or that the Constitution permits.
Yeah. Now, it is on appeal, but the injunction holds until the appeal is heard.
The injunction ended up a little bit narrow.
And is the injunction just about unlimited lending? It's not about single user lending?
The Internet Archive already stopped with the unlimited lending after a very short period. It was like March through June or something like that. I'm not positive of those dates, but it was very brief. and then it was back to the one-to-one. The injunction applies to the one-to-one, but it is, I think, limited to certain works.
It
in
only
suit.
covers books that are available in electronic format, not the publisher's full catalog of books in print. Also, the publisher has to notify the archive of their commercially available books, so the archive can remove only those books from lending. If a book is out of print or not available, the archive is allowed to keep it in their library, which is
I was about to say, because I've borrowed quite a few
you
books
can still borrow
from
books.
the Internet Archive in the last couple of months.
It's not completely closed. Fortunately, the injunction is more limited than that. But I think if the ruling isn't overturned, all the dominoes will fall.
Currently, if a book is out of print or is not available in an electronic format, you can get it from the Internet Archive. So it can be in print, but just not in a e-format. In which case, the
power broker,
the judge, the power broker. The judge said actually the power broker is available in both.
No, it's not. Very famously, not allowed to be an ebook.
Oh, but it is an audio book. So I don't. That's an interesting question. Does that count? I don't know. I would say an audiobook is an electronic format, but I don't know what the judge
think they were just dealing with the works in suit was the
ebooks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think it's particularly interesting because I would argue, I mean, I'm sure this has nothing to do with the actual legal standards here, but traditional ebooks are a very different online reading experience than a scanned copy of a
That's actually
book.
One of the things
and
the
sometimes
archive points out.
You really need that.
Yeah, the archive points out that their scans have real page numbers, for instance. So if you've got a reference to a page number in a book, it's not going to help you with a Kindle version, but it is going to. But it works with the archive books because they have page numbers. They're scanned.
Yeah. For instance, I mean, this is a specific example. I recently checked out a bunch of books from the Internet Archive because I was trying to buy, albeit from eBay, a bunch of 1990s web design books because I'm really interested in the graphics of like mid 1990s web design is very interesting to me. But I wanted to make sure the books I was
construction signs.
Listen, I love an under construction sign. I love, a little Netscape weird
opening and
graphic. But I was
closing
like, I want to make
mailbox.
sure that the books that I am buying have the sort of full page color graphics that I'm interested in. So I checked out probably dozens of books, not at the same time, from the Internet Archive so that I could check all of this. And it was super useful in making my purchasing decision.
You did see the Terrence Eden's CSS thing that makes old web pages, like when you get a reference to a BBC News article from 1990, it doesn't look like that. It's reformatted to fit the modern BBC's look, right? So he's created a CSS file that makes web pages that are old look as old as they are.
Perfect. Sometimes I just want to live in that internet for a bit. Just kind of a janky,
did live in that internet.
strangely formatted.
And I don't think the new internet is necessarily better. A lot of this dynamic stuff is not. Infinite scroll is not my friend.
Yeah.
I want to go to the bar at the bottom of the page. It has things I want, and it's hard to get to it.
I mean, I've used the Internet Archive's library to. There's a Tech Dirt post I wrote about a Danny Dunn book I remembered reading when I was growing up. It's out of print. The libraries have largely cleared it from their shelves, but I really wanted to reread it and write about it, and thankfully the Internet Archive had a scan, so I was able to do that. I've read other books that then I've checked out of libraries. I've read other books that have led to purchasing decisions. Like, this is part of how culture works. You give people access to it, and that's how you're going to end up getting money out of it. But if people live in closets because they can't get access to anything, nobody's making any money.
But Cory Doctorow is coming on Twit, isn't he, in a couple of weeks, right?
The 21st.
21st. So we'll definitely get into this with Cory because he is, he's interesting because he's an author. He's got a lot of books in print, but he has very strong opinions that the publishers are wrong on this, and of course defends the Internet Archive. We'll talk about it when Cory's on the 21st.
But just to wrap that around, I think the issues in the Internet Archive appeal are, as I was writing that amicus brief, I was rewriting the comment I wrote about the copyright in AI, that right to read and access to knowledge and what is the point and purpose of copyright law. I was making the same arguments in both contexts.
Yeah. Going full circle, connecting it all. By the way, there are people who probably think the No Fakes Act is a pretty good idea, including gaming voice actors. You may have heard the story earlier this week that SAG-AFTRA, the actors union, had struck a deal with an AI firm called Replica Studios that pre-negotiates the cost and the right of Replica Studios to take a voice artist and generate AI and use their AI version in games. Voice artists are not happy. They say they weren't told about the deal. They say this is why we went on strike for months last year to fight for protections from AI. Many voice actors, this is from the BBC, have suggested this new deal is at odds with the purpose of that strike. Fallout and Mortal Kombat voice actor Sunil Malhotra says, quote, he sacrificed to strike half of last year to keep my profession alive, not to shop around my AI replica. SAG-AFTRA says the deal was approved by effective members of the union's voiceover performer community. I don't know if they had a vote, but they say, we asked, but many voice actors, including Steve Bloom, a voice actor once credited by Guinness for being the most prolific in video games, said nobody he knew approved of the deal. Nobody asked me or anybody I know. So interesting.
Do you have any sense of what the compensation is going to be like? Or are they actually talking about replacing, a AAA game lead with an AI replica? Because the compensation can't be equal.
SAG-AFTRA says this will allow Replica to engage SAG-AFTRA members under fair, ethical agreements to safely create and license a digital replica of their voice. I presume usually what happens with the unions is they negotiate what they call a scale payment, which is the lowest possible payment. Mm-hmm. And then you can negotiate with Replica to be paid more, but they can't be paid less, I guess.
I mean, because this could put so many voice actors out of work. It reminds me of, what was that series that happened recently that had a Bourdain, a voiceover of him.
Oh, yeah. It was a documentary about Anthony Bourdain. Yeah. They had a piece of text that Bourdain had written, but they wanted him to read it. Of course, Bourdain's passed, so they got an AI to generate the voice and used that voice in the documentary. It was very controversial.
So I'm not quite sure what law I want to apply there. I don't like that emotionally. That creates a gut punch, and it feels icky and potentially fraudulent, although if they weren't trying to sell something...
Does feel icky hold any weight in law?
It tends to be what inspires law to get created.
Right.
Like, we take a lot of our sense of ickiness and we build law around it, but there's not a perfect alignment between what feels icky and what law actually says no to, because there's also things holding back law, like First Amendment and things like that.
And I would presume a judge or a jury would be instructed to not take into account how they feel about it, but what the law says, right?
Well, things go off the rails all the time. We're human beings,
especially
and we adjudicate things weirdly. So, but I worry. So I'm not quite sure what I want the solution to be. Now, if they were trying to use it to sell something, we may already have law, because we already have laws about fraud and deception.
Tom Hanks has recourse to them using his image.
He probably has a right of publicity claim that's already recognized.
Yeah.
But
if he's dead, does he have the claim?
Well, so I get squicked by a couple of things. For living people, I do think that the right of publicity makes sense, but there are some conflicts with the First Amendment that give me a lot of pause. But in terms of a dead person,
Albert Einstein, for instance,
I get emotionally squicked by the idea that we're going to resurrect a dead person to do something in the living world, but I really hate that dead people can say no to things that the living want to do. So I would probably rather put my thumb on reanimated Albert Einsteins than to say that a dead Albert Einstein can say no to things. There's a ton of things where the estates of dead people get to say no. The estate of Dr. Seuss got to say no to a whole really interesting, exciting, different book that he wasn't going to write. I mean, he's never going to write it even if he was alive, but he's definitely not going to write it if he's dead. But now nobody got to write it because the estate of a dead person got to say no to a new creative work, expressive work that a living person wanted to do. And I don't think law or the First Amendment should ever say yes to that.
According to The Guardian, Albert Einstein has earned far more posthumously than he ever did in his lifetime because this lawyer basically argued that there is an estate, and the Einstein estate has been extremely litigious in fighting to defend Einstein's image.
How does this work? Does the estate just get control of that forever?
Okay, so when he died in 1955, his will said that manuscripts, copyrights, publication rights, royalties, and all other literary property would go first to his secretary and stepdaughter, and upon their death to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He didn't mention his likeness or the use of his name for products or advertisements, publicity rights. But when Hebrew University took control of the estate in 1982, they decided, we got those two.
I mean, there's an awful lot of putative owners of rights helping themselves and just claiming to own rights that may or may not actually exist and certainly may or may not be owned by them. But if they've got the ability to pay the lawyers, then functionally they got some rights.
Yeah.
But it comes at the conflict of other expression that the First Amendment is supposed to protect, that the public be able to engage in. And this is a problem. In terms of copyrights, that tends to be more tangible. I think it's a mess. I think shortcuts are being taken, especially if the copyrights predate the 1976 Act, because the 1909 Act was so picky about, like, did you register, did you renew, things like that. But I think that's a problem. Dead authors are not going to be incentivized by a longer copyright term to create a thing that they are not alive enough to create.
One place that Hebrew University has been thwarted is the state of Illinois, where there's a statute protecting everything from a celebrity's likeness to their gestures and mannerisms for 100 years only. And after 100 years, it becomes public domain. The university is suing more than 100 people in the state of Illinois because people have said, oh, God, we can use Einstein.
I don't know if
I'm surprised that more states or areas don't have limitations like that.
Well, yeah. I think they're starting to, like, a lot of states, most states have a right of publicity law. A bunch of states, like particularly where the entertainers live, are contemplating having laws that would give rights in the dead person's image or personality or something like that. You know, the way that Illinois then limits it so you can't have it forever is better than making it forever. But I think it's a problem that they could have it at all. I mean, it deals with the squick factor, but it doesn't deal with the fact that, like, dead people shouldn't be able to control what the living can express. And ultimately, these laws come down to giving, I mean, it's not even the dead person. It's somebody who manages to own the property as a result of intestacy. But quite frankly, a lot of these wills aren't written in a way that really passes those, I don't know, I don't even want to say property rights, but some form of rights to heirs in a way that's necessarily coherent, accurate, or fair. There's a number of instances of, like, you know, trophy wives all of a sudden controlling the copyrights of, like, their, you know, wealthy dead husband just because, woohoo, like, by the time he died, they ended up taking it via the marriage, and, like, you know, his kids of 40 years, like, got nothing.
There is a doctor, though, who has Einstein's brain. He kept his brain, so.
Stephen Levy tracked him down.
Yeah.
But at least it's tangible. It doesn't bother me in quite the same way.
It might bother Einstein if he knew about it, but I guess he doesn't, since he's in a jar.
I don't know.
Now.
When I die, some doctor can have my brain.
They can have my brain.
I mean,
I'm not gonna be using
you
it.
can authorize this as a living person. The question is whether somebody can then take it if you didn't authorize it. That's where the squick factor comes in.
Let's take a little break. What's that? The squib?
The squick factor.
Squick. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a legal term.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
It is now.
I like it. It's squeamish and ick kind of merged together.
I didn't make it up. Squick
You didn't make it up?
Squick is
There's
a word.
a real word,
Yeah.
squick?
Yeah.
Let's check the Urban Dictionary. No, before I do that, much before I do that, let me talk about our advertiser. We're so thrilled, by the way, to have Kathy Ellis in studio. Nice to see you, Kathy. Paris Martineau let's see, you're not in vivo, so you must be in vitro. Yeah, that's glass. Right behind the glass in the Zoom. Jeff will be back next week. Our show today brought to you by Melissa, the data quality experts. For a long time, since 1985. Melissa offers free trials, sample codes, flexible pricing, and an ROI guarantee. You'll also like that, but you'll like the unlimited technical support to all customers all over the world. Melissa's international address validation cleans and corrects street addresses worldwide. Addresses can automatically transliterate from one system to another, for example, Chinese to Cyrillic. You can download the free Melissa Lookups app. Try it for yourself for free on Google Play or the App Store. You don't even need to sign up. You can use it to validate an address and a personal identity in the U.S. or Canada. You can check global phone numbers with it to find caller, carrier, geographic information, check global IP address information, and more. Melissa has achieved, by the way, I've used the Melissa app. It's so cool. When I get one of those texts from an unknown number that says, hello, I always look it up in the Melissa Lookups app to see, is that coming from Burma? Usually is. Or I'm sorry, Myanmar. Melissa has achieved the highest level of security status available by gaining FedRAMP authorization. Now, that, of course, is for government agencies, but it lets you know you're going to gain this superior level of security. It's validated. Melissa's solutions and services are also GDPR, CCPA compliant. They meet SOC 2 and HIPAA high trust standards for information security management. So your data is safe with Melissa. You need Melissa in your business. Get started today. 1,000 records cleaned for free. Melissa.com/twit. MELISSA. Melissa.com/twit. We thank them so much for their support of This Week in Google. I always thought it'd be kind of cool, totally parenthetically, if somebody took all of these hundreds, tens of thousands of hours of video and audio of me and made an AI out of it. I'd be honored.
Yeah. You could retire. It could just do your job for you.
Oh, you mean before I die even?
Yeah.
Let's do it now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's already happened.
Yeah, maybe we've been got. Maybe that's why you've turned so pro AI over the past month.
I like
the calls coming from inside the house.
Don't you like AI?
Well, she can't.
You should.
She can't see you in 3 dimensions. In theory, I can.
That's true.
It could be a hologram.
But I don't know, Kathy. You could be fake too.
I'm starting to wonder.
Yeah, from your point of view, this could all be just a trick we're playing on Paris Martineau.
I could just This podcast might not even exist. I could just be talking to
Paris, I think you're a figment
robots.
of my imagination. I've just decided that.
You know who's
that
not?
Could be fair.
Salt Hank. He's real.
That's true. Salt Hank is realer than all of us.
This is Paris's new dating technique. I know Salt Hank is dad. That's good.
Listen, I was on a date the other day. They were asking about the podcast. I mentioned the Cheetos duster and happened to mention Salt Hank, Leo's very TikTok famous son. And the guy goes, holy crap, you know Salt Hank's dad? Wow, I'm 2 degrees away from Salt Hank.
That's
and I cackled.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm going to be talking about this in the
funny.
podcast immediately.
Yeah, he's been. He just did a. Have you ever watched The Bear? It's a great TV show on FX about restaurants and cooking. In fact, some people I know who work in the restaurant industry say I can't watch it. It's too anxiety-inducing because it's too realistic.
That's the thing, is I've heard it's very stressful, and I don't need any more.
He just the people who do The Bear thing just sponsored him to go on a food tour of Chicago. They retracing the steps of one of the episodes in The Bear. One of the Bear people, Adi goes for a tour around Chicago to get inspired by the flavors of Chicago. Hank got to go to all the same restaurants. Oh my God, it looked amazing.
Wow.
It really
Did he eat
amazing.
any of this food, or was this all just for show?
No, he ate it all, and in fact he keeps complaining. I can't eat anymore. I
I've
can't.
had my whole life. Grabbed a quick cup of
Wow,
coffee
what a
and it
poor
was on to
life.
My favorite spot of the whole trip, I think, Publican Quality Meats.
That looks inappropriate.
A little biased because it was like all sandwiches and
Wow.
meat. There's Brad getting a tour of the cured meat fridge.
It's all pancetta down the bottom. These things.
When he came back for this, he said, "Oh, Dad, this is the best day of my life. I got
Got
to."
some insane fresh sliced meat.
I got to
giant
eat.
charcuterie platter. The spread was
This is his
humongous.
favorite.
Obviously, we're not going to
A
finish it.
cured
I'm so
meat
full.
fridge is my
Had to
dream.
pick it up.
Yeah, his too. He grew up like his favorite Christmas present was a whole salami, and it usually be gone by
That's
the end of the
fantastic.
day. Like we put it in a stocking. You know? It can't be good for you.
God, it's great for you.
Hey, you know what we're not going to talk about on this show? CES.
Fantastic.
Don't
Thank
care.
you.
Don't care. Have you ever had to go Paris for any of your?
Nope.
No.
And I'm so happy about that. The closest I've ever gotten was, I think, last year. I was on the Twit after CES and listened to you and Padre.
Oh, he's gonna
go
do it again.
through his
Yeah.
bag of treasures.
Yep.
And each one, I was like, wow.
He's
Could
going to
not
do
care
it
less
again.
about this.
He is right as we speak. He is on the show floor at the Las Vegas Convention Center in his priest's collar saying, "God wants you to give me that." And it works. He's going to come back with a giant package of...
What do you think the silliest item he could bring back
It might be
is?
this. This is Lenovo's Yoga Book, ZenBook Duo. Sorry, this is Asus's ZenBook Duo. It's a two-screen computer with a detachable blue. Everybody's doing these. I don't know who wants these.
Notably, the screen in this photo, for those listening, is on top of the other screen.
It's ugly.
It's just a really tall. I mean, you've seen the videos or photos of people in public coffee shops with like a 4-screen setup,
Setting
right?
up this massive setup. That's ridiculous. Yeah.
This is enabling those folks.
I mean, I am possibly in the market for better screenage than I've got, but I am not entirely
You
sure
don't want
that is going to solve the problem.
Yeah. I
do you
think
need
honestly.
it to be portable, though?
Yeah, because I don't have like a stable setup. So
Well, and you have a ThinkPad.
Yeah.
This is a great computer. I'm sure Lenovo. In fact, I know Lenovo has a dual screen, but I don't. Just don't. It's just a bad idea. You could get a second screen.
Well,
John, you do this.
I need a
Here's John's
solution.
going to bring
I don't
you.
know what the
Here's John's
solution
going to
is.
bring you what he does.
Okay.
So you can get a USB second screen.
Mm-hmm.
This is who makes this? LG or Asus?
Yeah, Asus.
Asus. It's just a USB second screen. Watch, John's gonna take it out. It's got a little stand. You carry it under your arm.
Okay.
It's very pretty, actually.
Okay.
And then you could plug it in via the USB port. Put it on the other side so people can see. Okay. You put it on a USB port. Now you have a giant floppy screen.
Right, the stand may not be selling me, but
it's a good stand. Once you get it set up, it's good.
Okay.
And now it's going to be a second screen, so you have more real estate. So you can have your pleatings can stretch out onto the other side.
Oh my gosh, such luxury.
There are also smaller ones. Like I have a 13-inch one of those.
Yeah, there's a variety of them. Some of them are very inexpensive.
Well, that might be good because then you can also leave it at home.
You don't have to take it with you.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
There'll be a lot of AI conversations at CES. We'll talk about that. Everybody in there. Oh, he wants it back. Go ahead, take it back. You take it back.
I'm sorry, I thought this was a
he's
no
gonna set it up
zone,
for you.
Leah.
USB-A?
I have the big ones and the little ones.
She's got C and A.
That is the correct way to describe
big ones.
USB.
I don't understand why they keep naming these things weird things. Oops.
So that people
That's a
like
good
us
point.
can lord it over people like you.
Yeah.
Because we know the names. Oh, you mean a Type C?
I have been a geek. I can play geek, and I just refuse to indulge gratuitous geeking.
That's a good name for the show. Gratuitous Geekery. This week in Gratuitous Geekery.
No, this is useful.
What do
Hey,
you
that
think?
could work.
That's
this
good.
week in
Twig
gratuitous
good.
geekery is
Yeah.
good.
Good.
And then we keep the twig.
We keep
'Cause
the
thing
twig.
is, I was thinking the other way. If we did this week in AI, how are we going to pronounce that?
Twig.
Twiga?
No, we don't want to do that. This is Twiggy Geek.
We could be Tway.
Twiggy
just-
Geek. All right, so now you've got a second screen, which is going to light
it
up.
didn't light up.
It's going to light up.
No, it usually lights up when you plug it in.
Yeah, it's not happy.
Okay, this week in gratuitous geekery,
So let's not worry about
yo,
it.
Twiggy.
Yeah.
There we go.
Twiggy.
In theory, this is a solution that exists.
Yeah, in practice it is.
The longer you spend on this podcast, the more screens will surround you.
They just grow. They just grow, let me tell you.
It's sort of the AI bot replication. As we've just postulated, Leo and I don't exist. This is all a rendering, and the
Sure.
rendering is, we've
Exactly.
got too many fingers and also too many screens.
Yeah, exactly. The I.R.S., which for a long time Congress has really been steamrolled, by companies like Intuit and H&R Block, who made for money tax preparation software. They've managed to convince Congress never to let the IRS do a free solution. Well, the IRS is finally rolling out a free option for filing federal tax returns. Now, don't get excited. It's only going to be available this year to a dozen states. It's an in-house filing system. I mean, in many countries, it's interesting that I don't know if this would ever fly in America, but in many countries, you get a postcard in the mail that says you owe this much. Agree? Sign here. You send it back, and that's that. The feds know how much you made, right?
I mean, yeah, especially if you were like a W-2 employee.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
It's been reported to them.
They can do the math. So 12 states, you get to try it out. IRS says it's a critical step forward for this innovative effort. File for free directly with the IRS. What does Intuit say? It's a half-baked solution and a waste of taxpayer money. Intuit, by the way, makes TurboTax, just in case you didn't know. The direct file scheme is a solution in search of a problem. Intuit for years has offered TurboTax.
The solutions are paid service.
Yes,
TurboTax.
Give us $86. It's not going to hurt you. For years, they've had a, quote, free thing. They'd either hide it, right, way behind, many, many layers, and they do this to me every time, file for free, fill it out. Oh, did you want to file this? Oh, that'll be $86.
No, it's state. It's when that state comes up. And, you want to do your state
you want
taxes
the state too? That's another $12. It's like, and I fall for it every freaking time.
You use TurboTax, Leo?
I do. Not for me, for my mom. I do her taxes, and it's you know what? The only reason I use TurboTax, her taxes are pretty simple, but it imports from her brokerage where her savings are, her IRA is. So I don't have to fill in any forms. I just import it.
It's probably not a ton of labor that you're saving, though. It's like one form with one
Speak
number.
for yourself, Kathy Gillis.
Yeah, I will say, a couple years ago, whenever I did a pandemic-era layoff and then got another job, had complicated taxes, I switched from TurboTax to an accountant, and man,
it's
that
nice
guy's great. I use him every year. Yeah. It's wonderful. I just send him one email. A day later, he gets back with all my stuff.
He doesn't make any mistakes.
He doesn't.
I had a tax preparer who screwed up many years in a row. I had a big bill because he screwed up. I have a friend, same thing.
But do you trust a group of humans more or TurboTax?
TurboTax. It's a computer. It never makes mistakes.
We have learned nothing from this show.
I will say, as Leo is an automated machine, as we've now discovered, this all makes perfect sense.
No HAL 9000 computer has ever made an error. The direct file pilot.
What are you doing, Dave?
will be open to low and moderate income taxpayers with simple returns. I feel like this is not new. Like they've always had the easy, right? The 1040 easy online, but I guess this is new.
Well, not always, obviously.
Yeah. Can't have interest income of more than $1,500. Gig workers not eligible. Unfortunately, like 90% of people under 25 or 30 are gig workers these days. IRS said in November it expects several 100,000 taxpayers to participate in this limited pilot, the IRS Free File Program. Oh, wait a minute. So the IRS has always provided online forms any filers can use regardless of income to file returns at no cost. That's always been there. The nonprofit newsroom ProPublica has reported, for instance, that Intuit's TurboTax program steered users away from its free version, and Intuit no longer participates in Free File.
ProPublica has done some phenomenal reporting on Intuit's kind of complicity in a variety of different schemes to make it harder for the average American
This
to
was a few
file
years
their
ago.
taxes.
They called it the TurboTax Trap. Come along as we try to file our taxes for free on TurboTax. It is rather fun. I go through this every time. You see the ads that say free filing, H&R Block, free filing, IRS e-file, fast and easy, taxact.com, free filing, free guaranteed, zero Fed, zero state, zero to file. So they actually went to all this. It says free, guaranteed, right? We started the process, created the profile of a TaskRabbit house cleaner who took in $29,000. They did a fake return. They did a bunch of questions. After all of that, only then did we get to the bad news. TurboTax revealed, this isn't going to be free. Turns out you don't qualify because you're a gig worker. It's going to cost you $120. Then they went back to free guaranteed. Walgreens cashier without health insurance. Charge to accurately complete your taxes. You need to upgrade to TurboTax Deluxe, $59.99. So who gets to file for free? That's the question. TurboTax has been playing this shell game forever. So have all of them. And
that's their business.
Yeah.
Rent sinking.
You may remember and let's give them some credit, the Joe Biden Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 somebody's got it, ordered the I.R.S. to study direct filing. In May, the agency reported it to Congress. They found a majority of taxpayers would be interested in using a direct file tool. A majority.
I'm surprised that not every American was like, I love tax filing.
No, I want to pay for
complicated
TurboTax.
And expensive.
Yeah, let's keep this crazy. A separate report from the Treasury Department's Inspector General said the design of the surveys overstated taxpayers' interest. Oh, please. It just goes on and on.
Taxpayers are renowned for, yes, of course, I'd like to pay more for stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd like it to be more complicated and expensive specifically.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And taxpayers in particular, that's the interest that interest group is most known
That's
for.
That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
Yes. They don't call us payers
we want
for
to
nothing.
be paying more.
We're not tax takers. We're taxpayers.
Right, yes. We are proud of it.
Proud of it. The EFF has released, this is interesting, a street-level surveillance hub. Did you see this? Have you tried using it? It will let you know what law enforcement has deployed against you in your area. Automated license plate readers, biometric surveillance, body cameras, electronic monitoring, face recognition, drones. Wow.
So Marin County just allowed the sheriff's department to spend something like $100,000 to roll out license plate reading cameras in unincorporated areas of Marin County, including intersections that happen to, keep people from approaching the Civic Center where they pay taxes, vote, things like that.
Protest.
I don't understand entirely why they greenlit it. I also don't understand why these things aren't being challenged. What I think I really don't understand is why the public is not further outraged, and also why the Board of Supervisors that in theory should be looking out for the public did not ask questions. There's certain things that were provided that, buzzword level encryption, and in theory, possibly access to the data that may require a warrant. This is all better than not, but none of it really solves the whole bit of every time you leave the house to go to the grocery store, the police get to take a picture and know. And that's a problem.
And by the way, they kind of know that we don't like this. Look at what they do in Arizona. This is in Paradise Valley. They hide the license plate cameras in fake metal cactuses. So as you're driving around, you may not notice that cactus over there, it has a camera inside. This is going to be a useful hub if you're curious to what kind of surveillance is being done. You can't actually search by zip code to find out if you are being surveilled. But if you go to sls.eff.org, you could certainly get educated on all the different technologies that law enforcement is using. And I think after a while, you're going to realize we have no privacy. We have
well,
no
and
privacy.
it's encroaching, and hot off the presses. In fact, I forgot to send this for the rundown. I have a TechDirt post of the copy of the letter I sent to the Board of Supervisors that I don't think they read, right before they authorized the sheriff's department to spend this money. This has happened within the last, I think this was a December thing.
Yeah.
So, your neighborhood county is going to watch your car.
Yeah. Traditionally, it is a privilege, not a right, to pass along the drive along the streets, right?
I'm not sure that I would phrase that. The right to travel is built into the Constitution, and also a whole lot of
driver's licenses, we require insurance.
That doesn't mean access to the roads, and this isn't coming out of anything connected to the license of the driver or the license. I don't know.
I can't drive a car without a license plate front and back.
I think that's a weak argument.
That's all taxpayer paid, though, so you did pay for that.
I think the issue, we could have paid for like a music teacher instead of the contract with the license plate reading company. But no, I don't think that's the way the Constitution works. I think in certain instances, I think basically the default reading of the Bill of Rights is that you're free to go about without being surveilled by the government, and if the government wants to do it, they have to be able to survive strict scrutiny, to have a good enough reason, narrowly enough tailored in order to do something. And that can justify licensing the cars, but that doesn't justify taking away all the privacy you would have had with passing down the roads.
But all the shoplifting, Kathy, all the shoplifting that's happening.
The shoplifting is not happening. That is also like moral panicking.
I know. Stuff, this amendments, Bill of Rights stuff, this is all hundreds of years old. Technology is advanced. You're not an originalist, are you?
I'm not quite sure what an originalist ends up actually thinking, but I think the Bill
believes that photographs will steal your soul.
I mean, I think one of the things that actually we should spend more time thinking about is people are like, well, the Constitution is outdated because now we have technology. We have had technology throughout the 200 plus years.
Writing is technology. The Supreme Court does not believe that very clearly. Nothing is outdated about the Constitution, right? The founders knew what they were doing, darn it.
I'm not entirely sure I would even boil that down to that. But in terms of general attitudes, like when people are like, well, the Constitution needs to bend because now we have all this technology. We didn't even have a full periodic table at the time that we passed the Bill of Rights. And yet we were able to scale our freedoms as we had a whole scientific revolution. We do not need to throw out the Constitution just because we've arrived at this particular state of digital technology.
Well, if you're not outraged enough, you may remember the Federal Communications Commission was funded by Congress a couple of years ago with the Affordable Connectivity Program. This was part of the way of getting broadband to every rural area, every low-income area in the country. Broadband access to the internet is really rapidly becoming a necessity, not a privilege, not a frill. Well, the FCC is about to start winding down the program. It gives $30 monthly broadband discounts to people with low incomes. Congress has not provided more funding. They say the Republican members of Congress blasted the Affordable Connectivity Program, saying the FCC is wasteful. In a letter, GOP lawmakers complained that most of the households receiving the subsidy already had broadband service before the program existed. I'm not sure I understand the logic of that. They threatened to withhold funding and criticized what they called the Biden administration's reckless spending spree. The FCC has announced that without further funding, we're going to have to end the program. We have less than 4 months left, and we will start winding down this week the program to give households, providers, and other stakeholders sufficient time to prepare. The Biden administration has requested it is expensive, $6 billion to fund the program through December 2024, but the current funding will not last through April, running out completely in May. FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel has repeatedly asked Congress for more funding. 23 million households. That's why it's so expensive. 23 million households enrolled in this. Don't know what to say. Just, there you go. You're not going to be able to get on Twitter anymore. FTC has banned X Mode from selling phone location data. This is actually really good news. I've said many times, we got to do something about data brokers. there has been very little regulation of data brokers, either from Congress or the FTC. This is the first, as far as I know, the first time a data broker has been banned from selling phone location information. They also ordered the firm to delete collected data. This is a data broker called X Mode Social. That's the first.
And they faced scrutiny in the past for kind of selling access to this commercial location data to like government contractors and I guess military contractors as well, right?
And I'm sure law enforcement. It's now known as OutLogic. We talk a lot about privacy, but really it's the data brokers that are the biggest invaders of our privacy, because they buy information from all the various little things that collect the data and then aggregate it, making it really incredibly rich and valuable. X Mode, now OutLogic, buys and sells the location data from phone apps. It's just one of, I think there are hundreds of companies doing this in the data broker industry. They face particular scrutiny, as you said, Paris, for selling access to the commercial location data of Americans' past movements to the U.S. government and military contractors. Apple and Google told developers to remove. This is, by the way, you wouldn't get an X Mode app. You get an app that had X Mode built into it. That's the thing. You wouldn't even know. Apple and Google did tell
It'd be
developers.
in like 5, maybe 10 of your apps.
Right.
And all of them would be, selling the sort of data to, I guess, in a positive light, advertisers saying, Paris just started going to the gym. You should probably advertise things related to fitness to her, or Paris's work has changed. She's moved neighborhoods. These sort of invasive and deeply personal things about your life and movements that you'd expect
and
to be
worse than
somewhat
that,
private.
States that have criminalized, for instance, abortion, can also buy that data to find out if Paris, well, I won't say Paris, but someone has visited a women's health center. And then perhaps even prosecute that person. So all of this data is collected. Medical and reproductive health clinics, places of religious worship, domestic abuse shelters, and on and on. It's precise location data.
I just got a really weird Facebook ad for something that was relevant, but there's no way I can think of how it should have known.
Well, now you know.
But I can't think of where they would have acquired data where they could put 2 and 2 together and decide that that was something I would care about.
Right.
And it mattered because
from your social graph, maybe.
It wasn't. It was a medical thing, and I'm usually pretty good with not uniting the medical stuff.
Did you take your phone with you?
Yeah, but it's still very oddly specific, and I can't think of. I mean, short of this is why people think their phones are spying on them, because it's like, well, yeah, if it listened into a conversation, it would have known, but without that, what data could it have picked up in order to put 2 and 2 together and decide that it was something that mattered to me?
It was Senator Ron Wyden whose office first revealed that X-Mode had sold location data to military contractors. Wyden said, "I commend the FTC for taking tough action to hold this shady location broker responsible for its sale of Americans' location data." OutLogic responded to this article in TechCrunch by giving them a statement through its public relations firm, saying, "We disagree with the implications of the FTC press release. After a lengthy investigation, the FTC found no instance of misuse of any data and made no such allegation. Since its inception, X-Mode has imposed strict contractual terms on all data customers, prohibiting them from associating its data with sensitive locations, such as healthcare facilities. Adherence to the FTC's newly introduced policy will be ensured by implementing additional technical processes and will not require any significant changes to businesses or projects." So they didn't fine them, as far as I could tell. They just ordered them to stop collecting that data and to delete all the data that they had. And as I said, X-Mode disputes that. Let's see. Just looking through. We have a bunch of AI stuff. A lot of it we've already done. Should I buy this?
Oh, God.
Wait, now we're into the CES realm.
I'm very tempted. We actually tried yesterday and couldn't. This is the Rabbit R1. And it is not a smartphone. It has LTE, has a camera. And the idea is, it debuted, of course, this week at CES. Instead of taking out your smartphone, you just push the talk button on the R1 and tell it what you want. And then the AI will do it.
Okay, what AI, though?
It doesn't say.
It's magic. Stop asking questions.
It
Don't look at
doesn't
the
say.
man behind the curtain.
It costs $199.
How is this different than pulling out She Who Must Not Be Named, the Amazon Echo?
Well, have you ever asked her for information? This can do things.
Or Siri, you know.
This can call you an Uber. You can say, hey, get me an Uber to the Empire State Building, and the R1 will then interpret your request, display cards on the screen. It has a screen showing your fare, and then request the ride.
Paris, that's Siri. This is AI. Therefore,
that's true. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Can
realizing.
She Who Shall Not Be Named make a reservation at a restaurant, book an airline ticket, add a song to your Spotify playlist? And the idea is you don't have a subscription for this. Well, you do. You have to have a SIM card, but that's up to you.
Who needs this? What would you use this for, Leo?
I think, well...
Are you jonesing for more voice connected?
No.
Anything?
But I think it's interesting that this could be the next generation of smartphone, right? Instead of having apps on it, it connects with apps in the cloud, in effect, and gives you, like an Uber in the cloud, and gives you...
Can we roll back the tapes for a month ago when you said something else was going to be the next generation of smartphone? It was that little hand device.
This needs to be a standard feature on Twig. What does Leo think is the next
generation of smartphone?
All right, I won't buy one. Okay. It's only...
I mean, you could buy one if you want.
If
you
it
should
were,
have fun.
I wouldn't if it were $1,000, but it's only $200.
What else could you spend that
practically
$200
free?
Practically giving it away. All right. You know, the good news is I went yesterday to the Rabbit R1 website, and it wasn't functional. I couldn't order it. So,
I mean, we are ruining the sponsorship opportunities here.
No, I don't care about that. That's
Rabbit. I feel like we're not just angel and devil sitting on your shoulders. Like, you know, we're both sort of. What are you thinking?
They might have fixed the website. This image was missing the last time I was there. Let's see. Clicking the pre-order button. Oh, now I can get it, but I won't.
Wow.
I'll listen to you. I won't. I'm tempted. Actually, they've sold out, according to The Verge just a couple of hours ago, 10,000 units. Now they're opening orders for a second production.
All right, what do you think the over-under is before this goes out of business? No shade to the team behind this. I'm sure they've worked very hard. It's a great product. I hope that they do well.
To really bring that home, remember the Humane AI pin? They've already started
Yes, that's
layoffs.
Exactly where I was going for this. I saw it and I was like, oh, Leo needs to know. This is another AI device that was going to replace the smartphone, Kathy, that Leo almost bought.
I think it, my sense of that would depend. What are the deals for the manufacturer of the second round? What are the numbers that they do? And are they busy basically plotting a pivot immediately off of this anyway?
Pivot. As soon as you take the money and run, right? We're going to do free tax prep software. Humane laid off 4% of its employees. They haven't even released the pin yet. They don't ship until March.
Soon the rabbit will diagnose you based on just a drop of blood.
Drop of blood.
Drop of blood. That's all you need.
Yeah. It's the drop of blood. Yeah, I guess there's a sucker
you don't even
born
have to
every
speak
minute.
to the rabbit. You just need to bleed on it.
You just have to bleed on it, and then it'll order you an Uber to the Empire State Building.
Right.
Oh, Lord. Well, that's the AI segment. Oh, wait a minute. Walmart is debuting AI search and AI replenishment features. They showed this at CES. Walmart president Doug McMillon gave a keynote at CES in Las Vegas, offering a glimpse of how Walmart planned to put new technologies, including AR, drones, generative AI, and other AI tech to work to improve the shopping experience.
I don't want a drone and Walmart united in the same thought.
I'll just follow you around with a basket, lady, and throw what you want in it.
They have an AI
just follow
shopping
you around
assistant.
And play ads.
Would you use this? That will let you interact with a chatbot as you shop to ask questions and get personalized product suggestions. You know,
my main goal when I go into any store is to talk to as few people as possible.
well, you don't have to talk
I want
to a person.
avoid all.
Talk to a
I want to
machine.
avoid all communication,
No, but
be it a machine or person.
If I have a question, I really want a human who's actually got like a broad knowledge base to tap
Have you
into.
ever been in a Walmart?
I try not to.
There is nobody there.
There was the emergency sweatpants purchase, and other than that,
Of
I don't.
1985.
It was in law school
can ever
with
forget?
a packing disaster
Yes.
as I went to a softball tournament. But
The AI, for instance, Walmart said you could ask it for, and I know you'll do this a lot, Kathy, a unicorn-themed birthday party. And then it will point you to the unicorn-themed balloons, napkins, streamers, and more.
I host World Intellectual Property Day themed birthday parties because my birthday is World Intellectual Property Day.
What day is that?
April 26th.
Happy
really good.
birthday. That's
Wow.
nice. We just recently, last week, had Public Domain Day every year on January 1st. Stuff goes out of copyright into the public domain.
I just think it's very amusing that the World Intellectual Property Association decided that the day to celebrate their doctrine was the day I was born.
I don't think it worked that way, Kathy.
I think they saw. I think they saw me coming.
Yeah.
Or they should have.
Lady Chatterley's Lover is now in the public domain. Threepenny Opera. Virginia Woolf's Orlando. Make sure I'm looking at the right year. Yes. January 1st,
Listen,
2024.
you're trying to avoid talking about Steamboat Willie, and I think
Steamboat Willie is the centerpiece. Now, this is the weird thing. That does not mean you can just use Mickey Mouse as you wish.
No, it's very specific versions of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. The original
There and Minnie
1924
Mouse is more
Steamboat
specific.
Willie movie, right?
There is no reason that copyright should work like this. Normally, copyright
Sonny Bono
is
begs to differ,
No,
my
not
friend.
not even in terms of the term, but normally copyright is the specific fixation in a tangible media. But with character copyright, it is all possible fixations in a tangible media, including ones that haven't been fixated yet. Like, this isn't something that doctrinally should exist as something that could be controlled. Each individual print of the film, sure, maybe even each individual frame, but Mickey Mouse as a concept is drawn like that, or even as drawn in other ways. This is not how copyright is supposed to work. As a friend of mine put it, it is doctrinally unpure, and I think it's a huge problem, and that's partly why we're tying ourselves in knots figuring out what we can do with Mickey Mouse and what we can't do with Mickey Mouse, because none of this makes sense. So it's really difficult to figure out the logic of what you can do when the fact that you can't do stuff is illogical.
Free the mouse.
Steamboat Willie was made in 1928. This is, by the way, U.S. law only. In fact, Steamboat Willie may be in the public domain in some countries, but is still copyrighted in others. So consult your
Which
your
has been
local
interesting
attorney.
for Google figuring out where to
what
block
can
the
they do?
videos.
Yeah. The public domain, so you have a 95-year term. Actually, that was because Disney would keep extending the copyright law every time it came close.
Right.
Most recently with the Copyright Act of whatever from Sonny Bono, who was a member of Congress at the time.
I think it was named for him. I don't
It's
know
the
if he
Sonny
was
Bono
actually,
Copyright Act.
but I think he may have.
Had he already passed?
He may have.
I seem to remember he was championing it.
He may have been championing it, but I think it got named after him because.
Oh, after he hit
Yeah,
the tree.
I'm not positive this should be Googled, but I think that's the order of operations.
It was 1998. President Clinton signed the Sonny Bono Copyright Term Extension Act, or as some called it, the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, extending copyright for the life of the author. Let's see, plus, it's so complicated.
Some number of years.
Just the right number of years.
Well, this was corporate, so the term is
95 years, yeah. The 98 Act extended the renewal from 47 to 67 years. 1998 Act, the life of the author plus 70 years for works of corporate authorship to 95 years from publication, or 120 years after creation, whichever is earlier. Yeah, right. I don't think Sonny wrote this. Come to think of it.
Well,
Maybe share.
I wonder if some of the emotions attached to his premature passing actually led to some of the momentum that did actually cause
He
him
wrote
to
it,
get passed.
or he was a sponsor
Yeah.
of it. I shouldn't say he wrote it.
Clearer minds might have pushed back harder, but
Yeah.
I mean, the
You're saying
grossest part about all
emotions
this.
negatively impacted the legislative process in our country.
What I really hate about the Disney thing is that like they made all of their money on open.
Yeah, they stole it all from others.
Yeah, it was all from other
Yeah.
In
stuff.
fact, the year before Steamboat Willie, there was a very strangely similar character that Walt might have borrowed. Forgotten the name of him.
Pinocchio.
No. Yeah, Pinocchio. Yeah, Garibaldi wrote that.
All of them. Little Mermaid, Snow White.
Yep.
These are all stories by someone else.
Yes.
Yeah. But even Mickey Mouse, which one would think, no, there couldn't have possibly have been anything before then, was inspired by an earlier animated something or other. In 1927, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was created by Walt Disney. That's a whole.
Oh, that's a cool
Oh, here
looking
you go.
Mickey.
Here's the Performo toy company, Mickey, which predated Mickey Mouse. This is 1925, before Disney even created Oswald.
And he even has the same name.
Yeah, it's called Mickey.
Wow.
A haunting looking mouse object.
M-I-C-K-Y, no E. M-I-C-K-Y, M-O-U-S-E. It is a little haunting. And it doesn't have the white gloves, so.
Oh, that one looks cursed.
But it does predate Mickey, okay? I'm just saying. In fact, they have a patent on it from 1926.
With the red pants and overalls too. Wow.
Yeah, it's got the suspenders.
Ooh.
All right, I'm troubled by patent.
It was patented.
Patented?
Yeah.
What is being patented?
Probably that tail.
The toy probably. It
Toy?
looks like the arms move and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
He applied for
The mechanism, but
and
it wouldn't have anything to do
received
with
a
the red
patent
of
for
the
his
pants.
toy, not for the for how it looks, huh? The name Mickey came later when he held a contest to find a name among employees of the toy company. Larry C. Grove pitched the name Mickey. They trademarked the name February 1927.
Wow.
The original Mickey was a hit. They sold the Mickey toys from 27 through 31. It was so popular they had to cut production of the other toys to keep up with the demand. This is from MessyNessyChic.com, which is the definitive source for first
information.
art. Yeah.
My
Anyway.
dad had always said he thought it was interesting how a culture that generally has distaste for rodentia, like honors a mouse in particular,
Well, it's
has
not
an
Mickey
empire.
Rat. Let's get that straight, okay?
Rodentia, mice
Rodentia.
challenge. Yeah.
Yes. Volkswagen says it's putting ChatGPT in its cars
No.
Why?
for enriching conversations and giving you some bad navigation directions, says Andrew Hawkins in The Verge.
People, okay, so this it just keeps rolling downhill. Everyone is like, let's throw copyright to obstruct AI training because there's so many stupid things that people keep trying to do with AI, and everyone just wants to stop the stupid. Let's stop the stupid in other ways.
You can use ChatGPT to control your heating, your air conditioning, or answer general knowledge questions.
I want, like,
My fingers can do all of that.
In fact, they're
want
going
any
back
Not
to
the general knowledge. No. Your fingers have no general
they're
knowledge.
going back to tactile buttons because they realized
Yeah.
that people were like not paying attention to the road when they had to do everything by context.
Yeah. Well,
Especially like if you're using like a CarPlay or whatever, like the buttons will move sometimes, and you're like, "What the hell?
Yeah.
Why did you move my button?"
they just change stuff for no reason at all. All right, let's take a little break. When we come back, picks of the week, and we can all go home happy in the knowledge that we have saved the Republic one last time from a fate worse than death, thanks to Kathy Gillis and Perez Martineau. Well done. Bravo. I would like to take this brief moment to ask you very kindly to support what we do here at TWiT. I think we do important, good work that helps you keep up with what's happening in the world of technology. Maybe laugh about it a little bit, keep you company. But really, our main mission is to help a community of tech enthusiasts understand technology and use it in their lives to have better lives and to make a better world. And I think we have an important job to do. But we're going to need your help. Advertising, which has sustained us for the last 17 years, almost 18, is dwindling. It's not going to continue to sustain us for much longer. So we need you to help. You don't have to carry the whole burden by yourself, but we'd love you to join Club Twit. It's $7 a month. That's all. You get ad-free versions of all the shows. You're paying us. We don't need to show you ads. You also get special shows just for the club. Stacy's book club is coming up in a few weeks, so I'm going to do that with Stacy. We've got the hands-on Macintosh shows, the hands-on Windows shows, the Untitled Linux show, Scott Wilkinson's Home Theater Geeks. Lots of stuff, including iOS Day today, which is now in the club. You get access to the Discord, which is a wonderful community of geeks that talk about everything, not just the shows, but everything going on in the world of nerdery. And you get the Twit Plus feed with additional content. I think it's a pretty good deal, but you're not giving us the $7 for all of that. You're giving us the $7 because you like what we do and you want us to keep doing it. If that's of interest to you, please visit us at twit.tv/clubtwit. Join the club. We'd love to have you. You can also help us. There are many ways to help us by going to Take the Twit survey. They're not mutually exclusive. You can join the club and take the survey. We do this once a year to kind of get to know you a little bit better, helps us design our programming, and helps us talk to advertisers about who's listening. We don't have any other way of finding out about you. So visit twit.tv/survey24. Twit.tv/survey24. Shouldn't take you more than a few minutes. We've shortened it considerably from previous years, but it is a very valuable tool for us. Something we only do once a year. So thanks in advance for that. Picks of the week. Kathy, did you bring anything? You always have like Huey Lewis memorabilia, weird stuff.
You can't go wrong with that.
Yes.
But I'm trying to stay diversified. I brought a URL that I found.
Love URLs.
Yeah, I brought a URL. That's it. I brought a URL.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's about Chunkus.
It's about a game called Chunkus. But what was interesting to me is I think the site that it's on is a site that I hadn't heard of it before, but people read it. And the person was talking about a schoolyard game played not at his elementary school in the town he grew up at, but another elementary school, which happened to have been my elementary school.
No.
So it had the weird, like, of all the gin joints, like, years and years and years later, I'm out and about in the country and I'm reading about.
Have you played Chunkus?
Yes, it was a game we played at lunch, recess, every day.
It looks like dodgeball.
Are you good at Chunkus?
It looks like dodgeball with really hard balls.
No, it's you generally use a tennis ball. You might use a racquetball, but then it became interesting because the racquetballs bounce so much further, so they'd be much harder to field.
But are you trying to throw it at somebody?
Don't tennis balls hurt more
you
than
don't,
a dodgeball?
You don't throw it at the person normally. You throw it against the wall, and you have to catch it cleanly, I think, after
it's like
one
handball,
bounce.
Sort of.
This is called butts up in my school.
Yes, because, and for some reason, it wasn't called that at my school. It had this other name called Chunkus, and it was so specific that in the town I grew up at, we had 7 elementary schools, and only my elementary school called it that. The other ones, it's a town of like 30,000 people, did not use the same name, and this person is lamenting how at his school they didn't use that name. He went to a school called Travell. I went to a school called Willard, and he's waxing poetic about a game I played as a child at Willard School.
They call it wall ball out here in California.
It may be the same thing. So, some of it's interesting.
There is a Wikipedia article. But I want you, Kathy, to get in there and work on it because it says this article has multiple issues. So I think you need to improve this. It's a North American elementary school children's playground game originating in the 50s.
Okay. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why my school, of one of 7 elementary schools in a 30,000 person town, had its own name for it. But the fact that somebody years and years later is waxing poetic and is envying
Can you
that my school
shout
had.
bear trap and have the other guy freeze in place?
That wasn't one of the
Not
rules.
one of the Chunkus rules.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, you would do everything cleanly, but if you threw it to the wall and it bounced before it got there, or you missed the wall entirely, or I think possibly if you bobbled and dropped it, then you'd have to go pay the penalty. You had to tap the wall like 5 times really fast, and if you didn't, then people could throw it at you. But that was not like the routine part of the game. The routine game was you just threw it at the wall and caught it, and threw it at the wall and caught it, and this was engaging.
This is actually a great site. Defector is the site, and David Roth is the author of We need to
phenomenal
talk about
example of
Chunkus.
local media
Yeah.
at work.
Yeah, isn't it?
Defector is the staff of Deadspin, a publication
That's right.
under Gizmodo Media Group that ended up kind of losing all of its writers because
Right.
the new private equity owners said stick to sports. And Defector, Deadspin, though it was a sports blog, also had a lot of great political and other commentary on it. So all of the writers quit and they started their own site. And it has been an incredible success.
More
over
power
the last
to him.
couple of years.
And shout
They
out hometown pride for this guy who did not go to my elementary school, but did grow up in my town of 30,000 people.
Yeah, Chunkus pride.
Yeah.
And Defector Pride. I knew that name. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. This is a. I hope they do well. I hope
They do. They put out an annual report every year with their finances, and they're profitable and growing.
Nice.
Oh, good.
Great.
I want to do advocacy for. That's the advocacy I do, to create the space so you can have these new people expressing themselves, and that there is money in it and that's sustainable, and that would be.
And it's a worker co-op, which is really fantastic.
Yeah, these aren't exactly new people. In fact, a lot of them are well-known sports writers and so forth. I mean, they've been around for a while.
I just found it because the guy was talking about my elementary school and the game that I played. But this is how information sharing works and culture is built. And I'm living entirely across the country and reading something about my childhood.
The right to read, and I love it that there's also a Wikipedia article, although they don't call it Chunkus, they call it Butts Up.
Okay. Clearly, there needs to be,
You're gonna get in there and do some editing.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely, although whoever wrote this Wikipedia article really shows the widespread variation of it, all the different locales. It's played in New York City, it's played in Santa Clara County, it's played in Huntington Beach, California. It's all over. In Australian schools, it's called Fumble, with a few differences. So it somehow has spread all over. And,
that's one of those weird things. Like, I think every elementary school kid knows this game. And I don't know how it's. It was never written. The rules were never written. Well, I'm talking about.
And a teacher doesn't.
Kids from the 80s and 90s.
A teacher doesn't say, "Oh, it's time to play Chunkus."
No,
this is something you decide to do.
Yeah, I don't think we were ever taught. It was one of those things that, like, as a kid, you just sort of know.
Yeah, it's like passed down. It's passed down from the older kids. You know?
Born with the innate knowledge.
Benito, we can get you to start a Chunkus League. We can have the first.
Well, I like the fact that, like, I'm using this platform to change the lexology. Like, I should just go into the Wikipedia article and change the name of it and make the Willard School version of it, which has now been lauded by David Roth.
It also helps that they were children, so it doesn't really hurt that bad yet. As adults, that might be a little painful.
Paris Martineau is now, we're going to have to call you the Queen of Tunnels.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start a segment here called This Week in Tunnels, because my pick of the week is a story that I've been truly laughing about for the last 3 days nonstop. From the mind that brought you the Tunnel Girl TikTok saga, which concluded with her being shut down, a new tunnel news cycle has been sweeping New York City. Specifically, earlier this week, or perhaps earlier this month, rabbis at a Brooklyn synagogue discovered a 50-foot network of illegal hand-dug tunnels by a bunch of young men who basically, I think during the pandemic, had created this network of tunnels underneath Eastern Parkway in a strange digging event that ended up, the reason why they discovered this is because it was causing potentially structural damage to the other buildings that the tunnels were underneath, because Brooklyn's quite densely packed. But it has become a major media story here in New York because of all these videos surfacing. I think I included a link to one of them in the show notes as well, of people just looking at a subway grate on New York City streets, and suddenly a full man pops up and runs away.
Not just a man, a Hasidic Jew. With
his hat.
With his hat and his sideburns and everything, pops out. And what the hell,
and
man?
sprints
and
away.
Runs away.
And so the rabbis were like, what the heck is happening here? We got to close up these tunnels. But the group of, essentially is a large group of young Hasidic men who were here on student visas, were like, absolutely not. So they had to bring in the cops to try and hold the throngs of boys back when they came in with the concrete pourers, and they rioted.
Now, what you're leaving out is something the New York Post only kind of glancingly alludes to. It looks like the tunnel was actually built to reach a women's bath, an Orthodox, young Orthodox woman's bathhouse. I guess so they could.
It had been abandoned largely.
I think it's because it was a separate piece of property, and there was there's litigation over who owns the property, and they wanted
more about this than anyone.
I have to kind of monitor the "people are yelling at Jews" thread, and here's why. So this is not. And it's more complicated, but there's some litigation over the other property.
So they weren't sneaking over to see what the women were doing.
No,
there weren't any people in there. I believe it was a closed building.
Yeah.
How long have they been digging this tunnel?
My understanding is I think it began at some point during the pandemic.
But the question again is why?
I am not sure, although there's one thing that like during the Sabbath that sometimes how far you can travel and how you can travel is limited. So this is why you sometimes see wires in the street because it kind of like extends the boundary.
About the wires, yeah.
I wonder if this was in some way in furtherance of the same idea in order to give access to a separate property, but I think it's also connected to the litigation over who owns that property.
So maybe it wasn't just the students, maybe the rabbi had a little something going on too.
It's extremely unfortunate and people not behaving well, and in a period of time when it is not going to do this culture any favors of people not behaving well in very public ways. So, I wish I could just laugh at the absurdity of it because this is ridiculous, but I sort of worry about...
I think that is the double-edged sword of this, is that almost immediately people, as they want to do, unfortunately, online, it became very concerningly anti-Semitic in the comments.
If you're using this in any way to justify anti-Semitism, you're cracked. You're nuts. This is just somebody digging a tunnel.
This is just a lot of boys dug a hole. Didn't want it closed up, which is incredibly funny.
Yeah, this is because they could.
Because I have a feeling this is just high-spirited young men.
And probably not the only example of random tunnels that have. We don't get this.
I bet you that there are others.
Elon Musk has probably built a few.
It wasn't that long. It was only 50 feet. Come on. Elon's got it going all the way under Las Vegas.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't bamboozle all the taxpayer money to build a mass transit system that doesn't go anywhere.
This was a DIY endeavor.
Exactly.
I love it. I love, though, the picture of a Hasidic boy climbing out of the grate.
Just wearing a full suit and hat, coming out of the grate, and then scampers away.
Yeah. Wow. That's
so
hysterical.
funny.
So they filled it with concrete, as you probably had to for structural reasons, if nothing else.
Yeah, at the very least.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine realizing the place you live has a random illegal tunnel built underneath it.
No one was hurt. I should
although it's interesting if you're saying that the other properties had some subsidence issues. I right out of law school, I worked on a case involving subsidence of a neighboring property. So I look forward to that litigation to kick off as well.
All right. Stop digging tunnels, everybody. But thank you for listening. I bet you there are a few people. I bet you there's more than one person who is listening to this show right now who is in a tunnel digging.
If you're out there, respect.
Do they get the reception?
Digging. Yeah, you don't have to have reception.
It's a podcast. You can download it.
Okay, fine. All right.
That's why they listen to the show.
A podcast to dig a tunnel with. This is your new tagline.
This is
That's
Week in
what
Tunnels.
we're looking for.
This Week in Tunneling. Paris Martineau, congratulations. Now, do you immediately go to another story, or do you have a little time to catch your breath?
A little bit of both. I have a couple things already kicking, so no rest for me. But that's all right.
She is the doing investigative journalism at The Information. There's her signal number on the bottom of the screen. If you've got a tip, 267-797-8655. And there have been tips. If you know of a tunnel
that have resulted in stories. If you know of a really interesting tunnel story,
anywhere in the major boroughs.
That is the two genres of signal messages I will accept are news tips that are legitimate and tunnel-related information.
Well, and the beauty of it, that red twine you use to connect the dots on the wall also works very well for mapping tunnels. Just saying.
That's true. I can never get lost when I go in the tunnels underneath Crown Heights.
Thank you, Kathy Ellis, for coming all the way up here. We really love having you in studio. CGCounsel.com is her website, CGCOUNSEL. She's at Kathy Gellis on Mastodon, CATHYGELLIS. Anything else you want to plug?
Lots of writing at TechDirt. We talked about some of it, but there's more. I had a really busy December, so you can read all the briefs that I wrote.
Nice. Okay. Is there some special skill to writing briefs that's different than writing, say, an article? Or is it similar?
I mean, I think you want to write in a way that you have a point to make, and you want that point
you are
to
an
be
advocate.
You're an advocate, and you want your point to come out clearly. You can, and to some degree must, use certain styling that the court will recognize and lock into. But I think my briefs should be readable by humans, and I think they're more likely to be read successfully by courts if they're readable by regular non-judicial people.
Right.
But it was interesting in our copyright AI conversation in the plagiarism part where I'm not supposed to completely innovate things. I'm supposed to cite my articles. And
that's right. Isn't that what you do in law schools? You study cases.
You want the pieces of ideas that came before because you're going to build. They're the bricks that you build your arguments on. So a lot of the plagiarism is bad norms really kind of contradicts some important use cases of why you actually want to make sure you've got tangible things that came before them as part of what you're expressing.
Do you think courts might be particularly open to that argument because they all are attorneys?
Well, they're really alarmed by the hallucinated cases that keep getting submitted.
They don't like that.
So they don't like that at all.
Yeah.
So and courts and law is, as industries go, are pretty stodgy, so they're not going to be moved too quickly. And at the moment, the use case for why we should move to more AI stuff is really not that present, at least in the judicial context.
I'm a believer. But then, of course, I would be because I am an AI. Thank you, Kathy Gellis. Thank you, Paris Martineau. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Thank you, AI Leo.
AI Leo.
We do Twig every Wednesday, 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern time is 2200 UTC. We do stream it live as we're doing it on YouTube, youtube.com/twit. Actually, if you subscribe, you'll get a notification in your browser when we go live. We go live when the shows actually begin, for the most part. Of course, people who subscribe to Club Twit can also join us in the Discord and watch the live stream there. I forgot to mention, and I don't know if Ant sent me this or a fan of Ant, but Ant Pruitt was a long time on our show. We unfortunately had to lay him off with others at the end of the year last year due to the lack of revenue. Just dropped his beautiful thing.
Yeah. This is because you're a bot, and so therefore holding things is hard.
I don't understand solid surfaces.
The hands are
the hands don't work.
Yeah. This is a jigsaw puzzle based on one of Ant's beautiful photographs of the Big Sur coastline. This is going to be a tough one, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. So I don't know, Ant, if you sent it to me or if a fan bought it at Ant's site and sent it to me, but antpruitt.com/prints, you can get this print, and I'm guessing you can get a jigsaw puzzle out of it too. So that's really cool. Thank you. And it didn't say who sent it. So Ant, if you sent it, thank you. But I'm thinking maybe a fan. Maybe a fan sent it, and we'll be spending the next 10 years working on this thing.
I was about to say, there's a lot of blue going on there. You got your work cut out for you.
10,000 pieces of blue. Let's see, what else? If you're not a member of the club, please join us. twit.tv/clubtwit. If you haven't taken the survey yet, twit.tv/survey24. We will see you all next week right here on This Week in Google. Bye-bye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, Editor-in-Chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.